The bells toll softly in the distance, carried through a veil of mist. Imagine a map spread before you, its parchment old, its ink fading, and across its surface appears a name repeated again and again: Tartary. For centuries, the word stretched across Asia, vast and confident, etched by cartographers from London to Paris, from Rome to Amsterdam. And then, as if erased by a hidden hand, it vanished. By the 19th century, Tartary was gone, not with a war or a collapse that anyone could recall, but with silence. Its disappearance raises a question that lingers like a bell's echo. Was it only a label for lands poorly understood, or was it something more, something deliberately forgotten? From mud-flooded cities to star-shaped fortresses, from whispers of giants to towers that hummed with electricity, the traces of mystery remain scattered like fragments in the deep forest. And through it all, the image of the Knights Templar appears, not as rulers of empires, but as guardians of thresholds, keepers of bridges between what is remembered and what is imagined. You are listening to Serene Myths, where history drifts into dream. If you find yourself carried by the rhythm, feel free to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where and when you are joining us tonight. And now, let the bells guide us further, through mist and memory, to the first threshold, the door of the temple, where our story begins. The bells sound first. They are not the clanging, hurried bells of alarm, but long, slow notes drifting across a Jerusalem morning more than 8 centuries ago. The air is cool, mist curling low across the stones, softening the hard lines of walls that have been broken and rebuilt too many times to count. Hooves tap quietly against the cobbled road, iron striking rhythm as if it were marking a prayer. A line of mounted men emerges from the haze, their mantles white as linen at dawn, each marked with a red cross, simple and unadorned. The Knights Templar, as they will come to be called, are moving toward the Temple Mount, their lives bound by a vow both martial and monastic. It is easy to forget that these men, first gathered around the year 1119, began as little more than a handful of knights with a humble promise to protect pilgrims making their way to the Holy Land. The Crusader states were fragile, roads dangerous, and thieves lurked like wolves in the deep forest. The Templars became guardians of the path, not with grand speeches but with steel at their sides and a rhythm of bells to guide their days. Their order was approved officially in 1129, and within a century, they would become one of the most powerful institutions in Europe, blending the austerity of monks with the discipline of soldiers. Their role is a fact carved into the chronicles of Christendom, written in ink and sealed by popes and kings. But the facts alone do not explain the strange aura that has clung to them through the centuries. There is a quirk in their history, one of those small details that tells a larger story. Their rule, drafted under the influence of Bernard of Clairvaux, required simplicity to the point of severity. No extravagant garments, no hunting for sport, no long hair flowing in vanity. And yet, in this rejection of adornment, the knights created a style of their own, paradoxically unforgettable. The white mantle with its crimson cross, the clean-shaven cheeks paired with carefully kept beards, the banner of black and white stripes that they carried into battle, half night, half day. Even their name in Latin, Pauperes Commilitones Christi Templice Salomonici, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, seem designed to underplay their significance. Humility became its own armor. Their austerity was louder than gold. And then, of course, the debates begin. Almost from their first victories, rumors wrapped around them like mist around a bell tower. Did they unearth sacred relics beneath the Temple Mount? Were they custodians of the Holy Grail, or of a bloodline stretching back to the Merovingian kings of Gaul? Was Friday the 13th, the day of their mass arrest in 1307, forever cursed because of them? Or was that simply the unlucky symmetry of politics and superstition colliding? Historians remind us of the ledgers, of the debts owed to them by monarchs, of Philip V of France desperate for coin, of charges of heresy manufactured as weapons. Yet storytellers insist on the shadows, of ships that slipped from French harbors into fog, carrying treasures or knowledge that never reappeared in any royal inventory. In the balance between fact and fable, the Templars became more than soldiers. They became a door, and that door is why we begin with them tonight. When you imagine the Templars, do not picture only battlefields or cathedrals. Picture instead a threshold. They were a bridge between worlds, an order whose steel was not only sharpened for combat, but shaped into keys and locks, contracts and notes. They created across medieval Europe a system that allowed pilgrims to deposit money in one city and withdraw it safely in another, a kind of proto-banking that made movement possible in a violent age. Their castles and preceptories were way stations, islands of security stitched together across a continent. Safety became their currency, and in that sense, they invented something modern long before the word existed. This ability to carry value across danger is what makes them so useful as a lens for our story. Tonight we will walk into puzzles that seem far apart in time. The lost label of Tartaria on early maps, the buried windows of 19th century cities, the weather-worn shoulders of the Sphinx that may whisper of Ice Age rains. These things do not live in the same century or even the same millennium, and yet, like pilgrims scattered across a perilous road, they can be linked if we carry the right kind of token. The Templars are that token, not because they caused these mysteries, but because they embody the act of bridging, of moving something precious through hostile space without letting it perish. Consider how they moved ideas as well as coin. Their rule was copied and recopied, their rituals carried across languages, their symbols so enduring that centuries later, fraternal orders still wear their red crosses and speak their names in oaths. They became, in other words, a method. And a method can travel where men do not. It is in this spirit that we invite them to ride with us into the deep forest of speculation and history. Their bells will be our measure, their steel our reassurance, their mist our cover. We will not claim that the Templars drew the maps of Tartary or raised the streets of Chicago, but we will use their discipline as an analogy. Just as they standardized routes for pilgrims, mapmakers standardized names for lands they barely knew. Just as they kept two copies of a ledger in different places, cities sometimes seemed to hold two versions of themselves above and below ground. Just as they guarded relics, perhaps our imaginations can guard the possibility that what we call myth might sometimes echo truths whose documents were lost. There's a certain comfort in the rhythm of bells, the way they mark time without argument. Sext, none. Vespers, hours folded into a schedule that tells you not everything is chaos. The Templars lived by bells, and tonight so will we. Each chapter of this journey will be a bell ringing out of the mist, Not always clear, not always perfect, but always reminding us of where we are in the long procession of night. So let us stand for a moment longer at their door. The horses breathe in the cool air, snorting softly, their tack jingling like small iron prayers. The knights adjust their mantles, not in vanity, but in readiness. A candle flickers behind a slit window in the chapel, where another brother is already reciting psalms. There is a smell of wax and dust, of old parchment and olive wood. The steel at their belts glints faintly as the sun begins to lift over the horizon. What lies beyond this threshold is uncertain. Maps that name lands now forgotten. Streets that buried themselves and carried on. Stones that may have seen rain long before pharaohs. Fortresses shaped like stars, technologies dreamed and abandoned, societies reset and rebuilt, myths that stand like gates in mist. To enter all that without a guide would be daunting. But with the Templars, we are not claiming certainty. We are claiming company. And sometimes company is all a traveler needs to keep walking. So step with me through the doorway of the temple. Let the bells ring once more, low and steady, as we leave behind the familiar road and follow them into mysteries that wait with patient breath. Ahead of us lies the vellum and ink of early maps, the world spread wide as parchment beneath a scribe's hand. If you listen closely, you can already hear the scratching of the quill, the faint whisper of pages turning. Our next bell will sound in a cartographer's workshop, where a single word, Tartaria, once stretched across the roof of the world like a banner, only to vanish as if the mist swallowed it whole. The room is dim and cool, its shutters angled against the glare of afternoon sun. The scent of ink and animal glue hangs in the air, faintly sharp, almost like damp stone. Vellum sheets lie stretched on wooden frames, translucent in places where light pushes through. A cartographer bends over his work, quill scratching with the steady rhythm of someone who has practiced this line 1,000 times before. If you lean close, you hear not only the scratch of the nib, but the breath he holds each time the pen curves into a coastline. In front of him, the world spreads wide, oceans pale and empty, mountains rising in neat ridges, rivers traced like veins across a continent. Above the Caspian Sea, a vast expanse is given a single name, written with flourish, Tartaria. For centuries, from the 16th through the 18th, European maps carried this word as if it were a banner hung over half of Asia. Tartary, or Tartaria, depending on the tongue, was not a kingdom in the precise sense, not an empire with one throne and one crown. It was more like a convenient umbrella, a label for peoples and lands European geographers did not know well, stretched from Siberia down towards Central Asia. In the lexicon of the time, it made sense. Travelers returned with fragments of stories. Merchants carried goods whose origins blurred into rumor, and scholars borrowed liberally from one another. To fill a blank with a single name was safer than leaving emptiness, and so the word Tartaria settled across maps like a layer of mist. That much is a fact, and it is not in dispute. Historical atlases preserve the evidence. Ortelius in 1570, Bleu in 1635 maps etched in copper, printed, and hand-colored with careful brush strokes. Each shows Tartary vast and sprawling, outlined as confidently as France or Spain, even if its political reality was never so unified. But the quirk comes when you trace these maps across centuries and notice how stubbornly consistent the label remains. Rival workshops in Amsterdam, Paris, London, Venice, Different languages, different styles, all copy the same habit, echoing the same word. Sometimes entire cartouches are lifted wholesale from earlier engravings, decorations and all, as if the mapmakers were less concerned with truth than with harmony, less with correcting than with repeating a melody already familiar. This copying tells a story in itself. In an age when paper was costly and engraving plates took weeks to prepare, borrowing was common. But the near-universal adoption of Tartaria has puzzled more than one researcher. Was it truly a shared error, a quirk of tradition, or was it a kind of consensus, a way to make the world feel more knowable by using a single name across generations? The debate has kept historians busy. On one side, the academic consensus. Tartary was shorthand, useful but imprecise, and it vanished as knowledge improved. On the other, the romantic speculation. The disappearance of the word in the 19th century looks too sudden, too deliberate, as if something larger had been erased. Picture this. You are a traveler in 1750, standing in a print shop in Paris. You unfold a new map, still smelling of fresh ink, and you see Tartaria sweeping across the north like a continent within a continent. Now fast forward to 1850, in the same city. A new atlas lies open, and Tartaria is gone. The land is parceled into Siberia, Mongolia, Turkestan, names that feel specific, disciplined, familiar. The great banner word has dissolved, like mist. Is this simply progress, the sharpening of knowledge, or is it, as some claim, a bell suddenly silenced? Here is where our Templar Bridge returns, not in flesh and armor, but in method. The Knights Templar, centuries earlier, had built their reputation on standardization. A pilgrim could walk into a preceptory in London and receive a letter of credit redeemable in acre, and the system would work because it was consistent. The same seals, the same formulas, the same vows upheld across distances. The maps of Tartaria reflect a similar instinct: to duplicate, to magnifier, to maintain harmony, to keep the ledger balanced, even if the numbers were not exact. But just as a Templar ledger might mask debts behind columns of neat ink, a map could mask ignorance behind a word written boldly enough. One of the stranger quirks in these maps is the presence of coats of arms and symbols belonging to rulers that historians struggle to match with any clear polity. Lions, suns, double-headed eagles perched in corners of lands that no archive describes. Were these embellishments invented, or were they borrowed from sources now lost? A quill stroke can preserve a rumor long after the rumor has been forgotten. Like bells echoing across misty valleys, the same emblem can ring again and again, even if its source has been silenced. The debate sharpens when we consider the near-simultaneous disappearance of the term Tartary in the 19th century. Some point to Russia's expansion eastward, the mapping of Siberia in detail, the new scientific hunger for precision that replaced broad umbrellas with exact borders. Others whisper of deliberate erasure, a kind of cartographic reset. Why would every major atlas publisher abandon the word almost at once? Was it simply the tide of progress, or was the bell struck silent by design? Skeptics warn against conspiracy thinking. Romantic imaginations insist that a vast people or culture was folded into silence. Between these two voices lies the soft hum of uncertainty, like a bell heard faintly through fog. The Templars, had they still existed, might have smiled knowingly. They understood the power of names, of seals, of marks on parchment. To control a symbol is to control trust, and perhaps to control a name on a map is to control how generations imagine the land beneath. In that sense, Tartaria's vanishing feels less like an accident and more like the closing of a ledger. The balance carried over into new columns, the old heading erased, the account still existing but hidden under different labels. Yet here is the comfort. Maps are not the world. They are stories about the world. A blank space can be filled or emptied at the stroke of a pen, but the land beneath remains what it is. Mountains, rivers, forests, people living their lives. The Templar Bridge helps us remember this. Just as their letters of credit turned back into coin no matter how far you traveled, so too the land continues regardless of what ink declares it. The name Tartaria may have faded, but the lands it once described still hum with wind and with memory. So let us treat these maps not as evidence of conspiracy, nor dismiss them as meaningless relics, but as bells ringing across centuries. Each repetition of the word Tartaria is a chime, marking the hour of knowledge as it was then. Each disappearance is the quiet that follows. And sometimes the quiet itself is a message, reminding us to listen harder. If your eyes are heavy, rest them here. Imagine turning a page of vellum, the rustle soft as leaves in a damp grove. See the word Tartaria stretching like a banner across the roof of the world. Then watch as the ink fades, the word dissolves, and in its place are finer lines, smaller names, more precise divisions. The bell stops ringing, but the echo remains in your ear. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you can still hear it. Ahead of us lies another mystery, not in ink, but in brick and mortar. Streets where windows stare sideways from the ground, where thresholds lie buried below today's laughter of traffic. Places where cities seem to keep two versions of themselves stacked like pages in a ledger. Our next bell will ring underground, where the air is cool and the light filters down through glass set in the sidewalks, and where people whisper of floods of mud that may have come all at once. The sound changes as you step down. Above, the city is alive with clatter and chatter. But here, beneath the sidewalks, the noise softens into echoes, footsteps turning hollow as they strike against tiles that once felt daylight. The air is cooler, tinged with the smell of damp brick and old wood. You brush against walls where dust clings like fine mist, and in the dim light you notice windows staring sideways into the earth, their frames half buried at what is now curb level. Welcome to the underground of Seattle, where the ordinary streets of the 19th century lie beneath your shoes, a ghostly double of the city above. This place is no rumor. It is a documented marvel of civic engineering. After the Great Fire of 1889, Seattle's leaders made a decision. The city, built low along the tide flats, struggled constantly with flooding and poor drainage. To fix the problem, they raised the streets, literally lifted the ground on which people walked, by several feet. Buildings that had once faced the street at ground level suddenly found their first floors transformed into basements. Walkways of iron grates and skylights were installed so that pedestrians could stroll the new level while daylight filtered faintly into the buried one below. In time, the upper city thrived, and the lower city became a forgotten basement of history. Chicago tells a similar story, though with its own remarkable detail. In the 1850s and 1860s, that city decided to solve its swampy, disease-ridden streets by raising entire blocks. Not just individual buildings, but whole rows of them. Sometimes entire hotels and shops were elevated using thousands of screw jacks turned in careful unison. Imagine 100 men crouched in basements, cranking handles slowly, day after day, while life continued in the rooms above. Guests in their hotel beds scarcely noticed the ground lifting beneath them. Streets climbed like tidewaters, and sewers were threaded underneath to wash away the city's sickness. It was a feat of patience and steel. Every jack a bell rung in rhythm, every turn of the handle a prayer to gravity's patience. Paris, London, New York, these cities too have their buried thresholds, places where what was once a grand entryway now stares into soil. Walk the older quarters, and you may see a line of windows where only earth peers back, or a doorway whose lintel is inches below the modern sidewalk. They are quiet reminders that cities are not static. They breathe, they shift, they rise by degrees. The stones beneath our feet are palimpsests, one layer written over another, and the lower lines never quite disappear. And yet, among these sober facts, the human imagination hears another kind of bell. Why are there so many half-buried windows, so many doors that seem to lead into the ground? Some whisper of a mud flood, a sudden catastrophe in the 19th century that smothered entire cities under waves of liquefied earth. According to this theory, the world endured not gradual civic projects, but a single violent reset. Whole blocks were swallowed in days, perhaps hours, and when the mud dried, society quietly built on top, leaving traces of the drowned level intact but unspoken. Seattle's underground, Chicago's raised streets, the sunken thresholds of European capitals, these become in that telling not projects but ruins, evidence of a disaster too vast to admit. Skeptics shake their heads. They point to engineering records, municipal ordinances, newspaper reports detailing the years-long process of raising streets. They remind us of the slow logic of sanitation reform, of cholera epidemics that spurred action, of diagrams still stored in dusty archives showing exactly where the sewers were planned. To them, the mud flood theory is a romance of shadows, a bell that people want to hear but which has no clapper. To others, the evidence of buried windows feels undeniable, like a door ajar in the deep forest. The truth may be simpler and stranger at once. Cities are complicated, messy, layered things. They accumulate like coral reefs, one generation building upon the husks of another. What looks like catastrophe may in fact be renovation. But what looks like renovation may still whisper of deeper cycles we do not yet understand. The debate itself is oddly soothing if you listen in the right way. Two voices in the same room, one insisting on ledgers and minutes of meetings, the other pointing to half-seen windows and shaking its head. Between them lies the hush of underground air, a space cool enough to invite sleep. And here, once again, our Templar Bridge crosses quietly. Think of their genius, to carry something precious through hostile space without letting it perish. In their time, it was coin transformed into letters of credit, relics ferried under guard, vows carried from one chapel to another in an age of war. What if we use that same instinct to carry meaning across centuries? A city can keep two truths at once: an official story of sanitation, an unofficial memory of catastrophe, and neither cancels the other. Both lie stacked like levels of a ledger, both necessary in their way. The Templars would have understood this. Their ledgers always had two columns, debit and credit, mirrored and reconciled. A city, too, can be both above ground and underground, both raised and buried. The trick is not to choose one over the other, but to listen for the harmony between. The steel screw jacks of Chicago, the glass sidewalk lights of Seattle, the buried windows of Paris, each is a bell rung in stone and iron. They remind us that what is visible is not all, that beneath every familiar street lies a quieter one. And isn't that how history always works? One layer on top of another, the present confident in its permanence, the past muffled but still breathing beneath. So let your mind wander here, in the underground where mist lingers and footsteps echo. Picture lantern lights swinging over brick archways. Hear the hollow ring of a boot step on stone that has not felt the sun in a century. Imagine a row of windows staring patiently upward, their glass clouded with soil, waiting for someone to remember them. If your eyelids are heavy, let them close. The underground is a kind of lullaby, a chamber where time slows and bells sound deeper, more resonant. When you wake, or when history wakes, streets will still be above us, bustling and alive. But tonight, we can linger below, where the bells are softer, where steel holds the memory of lifting whole cities into cleaner air, and where the mist of rumor wraps itself around fact like ivy around old stone. And from here, the bell carries us eastward again, across seas and centuries, to a desert plateau where another threshold waits. Stone shoulders rise from sand, carved into the shape of a lion with a human face, its eyes fixed forever on the horizon. Some say its scars were carved by rain, long before pharaohs were born. The next bell will ring at dawn by the Sphinx, where stone itself remembers storms older than Egypt. The desert is not silent. It only pretends to be. At night, when the wind slides low across the plateau, it hums like a distant bell, too deep for most ears to hold. At dawn, when the first light brushes limestone, it exhales warmth that has been waiting through the long chill of starlight. And in the center of this slow breathing sits the great Sphinx, its lion's body stretched on the sand, its human face staring east toward a horizon that has welcomed more sunrises than any one people can remember. You stand before it, and you feel the air shiver as if the stone itself still remembers a time when rain fell here. The Orthodox story is tidy, and it deserves to be honored. Most Egyptologists date the Sphinx to the Old Kingdom, around 2500 BCE, likely built under Pharaoh Khafre, whose pyramid rises just behind it. Carved directly from the bedrock, the Sphinx is both sculpture and quarry, its massive blocks stacked to form neighboring temples. Its weathering is attributed to millennia of desert winds and sandstorms, grinding slowly at its flanks. The missing nose, often mythologized, was most likely lost to deliberate chisel blows rather than Napoleon's cannons. The Sphinx has stood for 4,500 years as a sentinel of pharaonic grandeur, a fact not seriously disputed by mainstream scholarship. But facts alone do not quiet the debate. When geologist Robert Schoch in the 1990s pointed to the vertical, rounded channels on the Sphinx's enclosure walls, he argued they looked far more like water erosion than wind. Deep grooves curling downward, he said, were signs of heavy rainfall, not sand abrasion. If true, it would suggest the Sphinx endured long periods of rain, rain that has not visited the Giza Plateau since the end of the last ice age, perhaps 10,000 years ago or more. Egyptologists countered swiftly. Context matters. Surrounding structures, inscriptions, and the architectural style all point to the Fourth Dynasty, not some lost civilization millennia earlier. But the debate was born, and once a bell begins to ring, its echoes can last for decades. Here is the quirk that makes the question even stranger. Some of the massive limestone blocks used to build Khafra's Valley Temple and other nearby structures were quarried directly from the Sphinx's ditch. Yet those blocks, stacked neatly into temple walls, do not show the same degree of rounded weathering as the enclosure itself. It is as though the Sphinx endured centuries of rainfall, while its neighboring temples somehow stood dry, or as though the Sphinx is older than the temples, a relic inherited by later builders who reused its quarried stone. Neither answer feels entirely comfortable, and so the grooves in the limestone continue to whisper their uncertainty. The debate deepens when we remember the climate history of North Africa. During the so-called African humid period, roughly between 9,000 and 6,000 BCE, the Sahara was green, dotted with lakes and savannas. Rock art in the desert shows cattle herding, boats, even swimming scenes. If the Sphinx bore scars of rain, could it date to this wetter epoch, long before dynastic Egypt? The mainstream insists no. The cultural and architectural context does not support it. But the alternative possibility hovers like mist over the stone, that an older people, now vanished, carved a guardian who outlasted their memory, and that Khafra and his masons simply claimed it, reshaping the head and adding their monuments around it. The Templar Bridge, as always, does not claim the role of builder here. The Knights rode centuries far away, in lands of cathedrals and forests, not deserts of sandstone. But their discipline gives us a way to think about this mystery. The Templars lived by bells, each hour marked with prayer, each ritual aligned with sun and shadow. They believed that alignment mattered, that stone chapels oriented to the east, that geometry itself could be a form of devotion. In this way, their sensibility echoes across time to the Sphinx. Here, too, is a monument aligned to the east, its gaze fixed on the rising sun, as if each dawn were a liturgy. The grooves on its flanks may be scars of weather, but the posture of its body is a prayer written in limestone. If we listen with Templar ears, we hear the Sphinx not just as a statue, but as a schedule. Bells ring in stone rather than bronze. Each groove is a note, each sunrise a strike of the clapper. The question of its age becomes less about numbers and more about rhythm. Was this music begun in Khafra's time? Or was the first note struck long before in rains that fell on a greener Sahara? Debate persists. Some archaeologists insist geology is being misread. Others find Shok's arguments persuasive enough to consider an older date. Like all good debates, it is less about winning than about listening. And that is where the quirk of the Sphinx becomes a lullaby. Imagine rain falling on its shoulders, darkening the stone, streaming down grooves that now lie bone dry. Imagine workers in loincloths carving blocks from the enclosure, their copper chisels ringing faintly like bells. Imagine later pharaohs standing before it, claiming its presence as their own. Imagine Napoleon's soldiers sketching it in the dawn, the sound of horses stamping in the sand. Across each of these moments, the Sphinx remains, a listener more than a speaker, a monument to patience. If you let your eyes close, you can almost hear water where none falls, a phantom rain echoing across thousands of years. The desert is pretending again, pretending to be silent. But beneath the hush is memory. And memory, like mist, does not vanish just because the sun rises. It lingers. It moistens the edges of stone. It softens the bell's toll. So let us not hurry to solve the riddle. The Sphinx itself has endured without needing to explain, whether it is 4,500 years old or 12,000, whether its grooves were carved by rain or by wind. It stands as a threshold, a door of stone, leading back into a time we cannot quite see. The Templars would have understood the value of such a door. They guarded thresholds all their lives between safe road and bandit path, between sacred relic and ordinary coin, between vow and temptation. They knew that sometimes what matters is not what lies beyond, but the act of guarding itself. As we leave the Sphinx in the warm glow of dawn, let the image settle in you. A lion with a human face, gazing eternally east, its shoulders streaked with grooves that may once have been rivers of rain. The next bell will ring further along this desert plateau, where the pyramids rise in geometric certainty, yet even they carry questions about foundations and ages. Some say the stones hide memories of ice, of cataclysm, of cycles of destruction and rebirth. We will walk there next, following the rhythm of bells across the sand, the steel of time itself glinting softly in the mist of memory. The horizon above Giza shimmers in the heat, but in your mind's eye, try to picture something else. Not sand and sun, but sleet and gray skies, wind cutting cold across an unfamiliar plateau. Imagine the pyramids not as they are now, golden stone against desert, but dusted in frost, their flanks streaked with meltwater, standing against a world still thawing from ice. It sounds impossible, almost laughable, and yet for a moment, hold it. Let the pyramids breathe in that image, because part of the debate about them is not only how they were built, but when. The mainstream answer is confident, and it rests on solid ground. The Great Pyramid, towering at nearly 147 meters when new, was built around 2600 BCE, during Egypt's 4th dynasty, almost certainly as the tomb of Pharaoh Khufu. Khafra, whose pyramid stands beside it, built his slightly smaller but still monumental version, along with the Sphinx we have just left behind. Menkaure added his own more modest pyramid to the complex. The engineering feats are staggering. More than 2 million stone blocks, some weighing over 70 tons, aligned with astonishing precision to the cardinal directions. The mainstream sees in this no mystery greater than human ingenuity, organized labor, and the wealth of a powerful, centralized state. And it is right, at least in part. Archaeological evidence of workmen's villages, tool marks, and inscriptions supports this dating and interpretation. But the pyramids do not rest easily within that single frame. Here is the quirk that stirs imaginations. Despite their age, the Great Pyramid's foundation stones are cut so tightly that you cannot slip a knife blade between them. Some interior joints are so precise that modern laser measurements find gaps less than 0.5 millimeter wide. The alignment of the structure to true north is off by only a fraction of a degree, astonishing for a culture without compasses. And then there are the air shafts, narrow tunnels aligned to stars that marked the skies of 2500 BCE, but also skies of far earlier epochs, when the Earth's axial precession tilted the heavens differently. Were these alignments intentional, or is coincidence dressed in starlight? From this precision, debate blossoms. Some suggest that what we call the Great Pyramid may not be purely a Fourth Dynasty creation. Perhaps its foundations, or some inner core, predated Khufu. In this telling, the pharaohs were not inventors but inheritors, crowning themselves with monuments already ancient. This line of thought often links the pyramids to cataclysms like the Younger Dryas event, around 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, when a sudden return to Ice Age conditions reshaped climates worldwide, possibly triggered by a comet impact or meltwater pulses. If a civilization had existed before that upheaval, its traces may have been swallowed by sand or sea, leaving behind only enigmatic monuments repurposed by later dynasties. Most Egyptologists dismiss such claims as pseudo-history. The radiocarbon dating of mortar, the context of surrounding structures, the inscriptions naming Khufu's workforce, all point firmly to the Old Kingdom. To move the pyramids back by millennia would be to ignore a mountain of evidence. Yet the counter-argument persists, precisely because the pyramids are so anomalous. They are the largest stone structures ever built, and they appear at the very dawn of Egypt's Pyramid Age, almost as if the skill began at its apex and then declined. Later pyramids, built with less precision and more haste, have crumbled into rubble, while Khufu's giant endures. Was it the beginning, or was it the echo of something earlier? The Templar Bridge does not tell us what to believe, but it offers a way to think. The Knights understood geometry as devotion. Their chapels were oriented to the rising sun, their round churches echoing the form of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. They carried relics not just as objects, but as anchors of continuity, connecting one age of faith to another. In the pyramids, we find a similar bridge, stone geometry that may connect two epochs, whether dynastic Egypt alone or Egypt built atop older memory. The Templars would not have recognized Khufu, but they would have recognized the impulse to align human craft with the eternal sky, to make stone sing in harmony with the heavens. Here is a softer quirk to carry into sleep. Beneath the sands of the western desert, explorers once found the remains of a Roman ship, far from any river. It had been left in a dried lake bed, marooned in time, a vessel of wood carried into silence by shifting earth. History is full of such surprises, where context shifts beneath us. So when someone wonders whether the pyramids conceal foundations older than the pharaohs, it may not be proof they seek, but resonance, the sense that history is larger than the pages we have read. The debate, as always, is less about certainty than about rhythm. Could the pyramids be Ice Age survivors, or are they firmly children of the Fourth Dynasty? Egyptology answers one way, alternative thinkers another. Between them, the pyramids stand silent, their massive stones indifferent to our arguments, their edges softened by sand, but still sharp enough to cast shadows like sundials across the plateau. If your eyes are heavy, let them drift now to the cool shade at the pyramid's base. Feel the stone beneath your fingertips, warm from the sun, but steady, solid, patient. Imagine rain once streaking down its flanks, or snow gathering briefly on its steps. Imagine a pharaoh's procession, drums beating, bells chiming, priests chanting as they ascend. Imagine, too, an earlier world, hunters in animal skins pausing to stare up at a structure already ancient. Each image is a layer, like the courses of stone themselves. Each is part of the dream the pyramid invites. The Templar bells ring faintly here too, not in bronze, but in alignment. A cross within a circle, a shaft pointing to Orion, a base square to the north. In these patterns, we hear the same desire that built chapels in Europe and mosques in Arabia, to weave the human into the cosmic, to mark our brief lives against the slow patience of stars. Whether Khufu or someone long before began the work, the impulse is the same. And so, as the mist of debate settles around the pyramids, we walk onward in the desert dawn. Ahead lies not a tomb, but another beginning, the birth of civilization itself in the land between rivers, where cities like Ur and Uruk seem to spring into being fully formed. How did they rise so suddenly with writing, mathematics, and laws already in hand? Was it slow growth, or was something passed down from an earlier world? The next bell will ring in Mesopotamia, in the libraries of clay, where the voices of Sumer still whisper through cuneiform wedges pressed into tablets that smell faintly of earth after rain. The desert gives way to rivers. From the golden sand of Egypt, follow the slow drift of bells across the deep forest of history, eastward until the air grows damp and heavy. Here the Euphrates and the Tigris wind like twin serpents through wide plains, their banks littered with reeds and the shimmer of mud brick walls. This is Mesopotamia, the land between rivers, where one of the earliest civilizations we know by name rose with startling swiftness. To stand here is to feel the rhythm of water instead of sand. But the question is the same as it was at the pyramids. Did human ingenuity rise step by step, or was something passed down, a memory disguised as invention? The facts are strong enough to astonish even without speculation. Around the 4th millennium BCE, the Sumerians emerged as the builders of the first true cities, Uruk, Ur, Eridu, Lagash. They created monumental temples called ziggurats, tiered platforms of mud brick rising toward the sky, each step a stairway for gods to descend. They invented writing, cuneiform wedges pressed into clay tablets that allowed them to record laws, trade accounts, hymns, and even jokes. They developed mathematics in base 60, the reason we still divide the hour into 60 minutes and the circle into 360 degrees. They wrote the world's first known literature, the Epic of Gilgamesh, with its flood myths echoing across later traditions. These are not fragments. They are the foundations of much of what we call civilization. And here's the quirk, the small detail that rattles the mind. Sumer seems to have appeared almost fully formed. The earliest tablets we have already contained complex grammar, as though writing had been practiced for generations before it was baked into clay. Uruk, by 3000 BCE, sprawled across an area larger than many medieval European cities, with tens of thousands of inhabitants. Their cylinder seals, intricately carved, suggest an artistic sophistication that feels sudden, abrupt, like a door flung open rather than a path patiently walked. Did cities this elaborate spring from small farming villages in only a few centuries? Or did they inherit something older, now invisible to us? The debate continues among scholars. Some argue that the Sumerians were simply brilliant innovators, that agriculture along fertile floodplains created the surplus necessary for urban life, and that the leap from village to city was accelerated by geography and need. Others find the abruptness unsettling. It is one thing for pottery styles to evolve slowly, for burial customs to shift, for tools to refine. It is another for a fully literate, mathematically adept, urban culture to appear with such velocity. Did they inherit from a forgotten predecessor, one whose traces lie drowned under the Persian Gulf or buried deep beneath later cities? The evidence is not conclusive, but the question lingers, a bell tolling in mist. Consider the quirk of their school tablets. Archaeologists have uncovered stacks of them, practice texts where students repeatedly wrote out lists of words, calculations, proverbs. But what is remarkable is how standardized these were, across time and place. It suggests an educational bureaucracy, a system already well developed. It feels less like an invention in progress and more like a curriculum already polished. As if, when the first school opened its doors, it already knew the syllabus by heart. Where did that knowledge come from? Was it trial and error compressed into generations, or was it, as some propose, the survival of an earlier legacy? The Templar Bridge helps us hold this thought without falling into extremes. The Knights were not builders of ziggurats, yet they knew what it meant to inherit traditions from earlier ages. Their prayers were not new. They were continuations of monastic rhythms centuries old. Their architecture drew from Romanesque, Byzantine, and later Gothic forms, weaving the old into the new. And like the Sumerians, they recorded obsessively, ledgers, rules, charters, all carefully standardized, so that a brother in London could read the same lines as a brother in Jerusalem. To inherit and transmit is not weakness, it is a discipline. Perhaps Sumer, too, was an inheritor, even if what they inherited has been lost. Think of the Epic of Gilgamesh, where a great flood nearly erases humanity. Utnapishtim, the Sumerian Noah, survives by building a boat, preserving life across a cataclysm. Whether myth or memory, the story resonates with later traditions from the Hebrew Bible to Greek legend. Was this simply a tale told around Mesopotamian hearths? Or was it a cultural echo of floods that swept across the Fertile Crescent at the end of the Ice Age? If so, then the very foundation of Sumer may rest on memory carried forward from a time before their time, guarded like a relic. The debate is gentle, if you let it be. Some see in Sumer a miraculous leap, others a logical progression. Some whisper of an ancient race, others of a forgotten coastal culture drowned as seas rose after the Ice Age. Archaeologists dig carefully, historians argue patiently, and through it all the clay tablets remain, their wedge marks sharp as the day they were pressed. Fact and speculation lie side by side like twin rivers, flowing into each other in the mist. And what a soothing mist it is. Imagine standing in a Sumerian street at dusk, the clay walls glowing orange in the fading light, the smell of bitumen and reeds rising from the canals. Bells are not ringing here. Bronze was still rare, but drums beat softly in the temples, and reed pipes sigh in the hands of musicians. Children recite their lists of words by torchlight. Scribes etch contracts for barley and silver. Priests climb ziggurats to light fires that mimic the stars. The city hums, alive, already ancient in its bearing. If you close your eyes, you might hear it still, like a dream pressing into clay. The Templars, centuries later, would also know what it means to guard a treasure greater than coin. For the Sumerians, that treasure was writing itself, the ability to trap speech in signs, to let thought survive beyond the breath that carried it. For the Knights, The treasure was not only relics, but the continuity of vows, the rhythm of bells that kept time across lands. In both cases, the method mattered as much as the substance. To standardize is to preserve. To repeat is to protect. That is the bridge across time. So when we ask whether Sumer arrived fully formed, whether it was an innovation or an inheritance, perhaps the answer is both. Innovation rests on inheritance, and inheritance is given shape by innovation. The ziggurats stand because farmers learned to channel rivers. Writing flourished because myths were already being sung. Mathematics spread because merchants needed to count. And yet, behind it all, there lingers the possibility of older knowledge, saved like a relic through flood and fire, waiting for the right soil to take root. Let your eyes grow heavy as you imagine clay tablets drying in the sun, each wedge mark a heartbeat, each line a whisper from a scribe long vanished. Hear the faint toll of a bell, not bronze, but the steady drop of water in irrigation channels, the pulse of rivers feeding fields, the rhythm of life itself. In that rhythm lies the truth. Civilization may seem sudden, but it is always a layering of voices, old and new, stone and reed, steel and mist. And from here, the bell leads us onward again, away from ziggurats and into fortresses shaped like stars. Across Europe, walls unfold in patterns so precise they resemble snowflakes. Are they only defenses against cannon fire, or do they hum with another kind of resonance? Our next bell will ring along those bastions, where stone angles catch the wind like tuning forks, and speculation whispers of energy grids hidden in geometry. The bells follow us across centuries, their sound bending from desert sands into European forests. Mist hangs low above rivers, curling through the trees, and when it clears, the sight before you is strange and symmetrical. A fortress spreads across the plain, not in the square or round forms you might expect, but in a perfect star. Walls radiate outward in angular points, bastions shaped like arrowheads, every angle deliberate, every line a calculation. You might imagine it was drawn first with compass and ruler, a geometric dream inscribed in stone. These are the star forts of early modern Europe, structures that once guarded cities and harbors with an elegance that seemed almost otherworldly. The facts are well known and practical. In the 16th century, the age of cannon and gunpowder rendered medieval castles nearly obsolete. Round towers and tall curtain walls, once the pride of knights, crumbled under sustained bombardment. In response, military engineers across Italy and later all of Europe devised a new form, the tres Italienne, or Italian style. Star-shaped bastions allowed defenders to cover one another with crossfire, eliminating blind spots. Sloped walls absorbed cannon shots more effectively, forcing attackers into killing zones. Cities from Antwerp to Palmanova, from Naarden in the Netherlands to Elvas in Portugal, reshaped themselves into these angular snowflakes of stone. It was a revolution in military architecture, grounded firmly in the logic of survival. And yet, the quirk of the star forts is how beautiful they are. Stand atop the ramparts and look down, and you see not only strategy, but art. From above, especially in modern aerial photographs, the geometry is mesmerizing. Points radiating like suns, moats tracing perfect circles, avenues aligned with mathematical grace. At times, the symmetry feels less like defense and more like design for its own sake, as if the builders wanted to etch a cosmic diagram into the earth. Soldiers once trudged through mud here, but centuries later, Drone cameras reveal snowflake mandalas glowing in green fields. That beauty, unintended or not, has become part of their mystery. This beauty is why debates emerge. Some speculate that star forts were more than fortresses. Could they have been nodes in an energy grid, catching and channeling atmospheric forces? Could their shapes have resonance, like tuning forks humming when struck by wind? Advocates of this view point to the uncanny consistency of the designs, to the way forts across continents repeat the same patterns even when adapted to local terrain. Skeptics reply that geometry was necessity, not mysticism. Angles were chosen because they worked against cannon fire. Symmetry was practical, allowing defenders to see and shoot in every direction. To them, the resonance is in the musket balls, not the music of the spheres. But stand here in the mist, bells in your ears, and the line between utility and symbolism blurs. The Templars, long gone by the time of these forts, might have nodded knowingly. They too built with purpose and with pattern. Their chapels aligned to sacred orientations, their symbols etched into stone, their rituals marked by geometry as much as theology. A star-shaped fortress is not their work, but it carries the same spirit: to impose order on chaos, to discipline space into a rhythm that can be trusted. Bells toll to mark hours, walls radiate to mark directions. Steel waits behind parapets as once it waited at a pilgrim's side. There is another quirk worth savoring. Some star forts produce odd acoustics. Visitors whisper in one corner of a bastion, and the sound seems to travel unnaturally, bouncing back as if the walls themselves were tuning chambers. In courtyards, cannon fire once thundered, but even an ordinary clap echoes with unusual sharpness, like a bell struck twice. Whether this was design or accident is hard to say. Engineers of the era thought about sightlines and trajectories, not harmonics. Yet anyone who has stood in a whispering gallery knows that architecture often sings without asking permission. The debate about hidden purpose versus simple defense mirrors the debate we heard at the Sphinx and the pyramids. Were these shapes purely practical, or do they hint at something more? The mainstream insists on pragmatism, and rightly so. Military manuals and engineering treatises survive, filled with diagrams and calculations all about angles of fire and fields of view. But imagination, like mist, finds openings. Perhaps the forts were also symbols, mandalas etched into landscapes, as if to remind both citizens and soldiers that order could triumph over siege. Perhaps their resonance is less about energy grids and more about psychological comfort, the sense that behind these precise walls, life could continue while chaos battered at the gates. The Templar Bridge steadies us here. Just as the Knights once carried value safely across perilous terrain, so too do these forts carry us between interpretations. One column of the ledger: fact, gunpowder, geometry, defense. The other column: speculation, resonance, cosmic diagrams. Both are written in the same ink of curiosity. The bells toll in both columns, different notes in the same song. If you close your eyes, picture walking through one of these forts at dusk. The mist rolls in from the river, softening the sharp edges of the bastions. Soldiers are gone, replaced by quiet streets where modern families live. The cobblestones echo with footsteps, and the air is filled not with cannon smoke, but with the faint scent of damp leaves. From above, the star glows faintly in twilight, its points vanishing into shadow. You feel as though you are standing inside a symbol, not just a wall. The bells of a nearby church ring the hour, their sound bouncing against stone angles in echoes that feel older than gunpowder. And so, we let the star fort breathe. It is both fortress and snowflake, both cannon shield and cosmic mandala. The debate is not a quarrel, but a harmony. Two voices singing in different registers. The fact that they can be both is what makes them lullabies for the imagination. Like the Templars, they remind us that discipline and beauty are not enemies, but companions. Steel and bells, mist and geometry, deep forest and open plain, all can coexist in the same design. As we leave the ramparts, the bells fade into the sound of wind rushing high above. Look up and imagine the sky dotted not only with birds, but with strange vessels drifting silently, sails taut with currents we no longer use. Airships, some claimed, once moved across the heavens like slow bells ringing in the clouds. Our next step will follow them upward into stories of atmospheric electricity and forgotten technologies, where stone gives way to sky and speculation rises with the wind. The bells fade from stone ramparts and drift upward, carried by wind. Imagine them ringing not in a church tower or fortress courtyard, but high above, their sound rolling through clouds like waves of air. You lift your eyes from the star forts below and see, in your mind's sky, a different kind of geometry. Airships gliding silently, their hulls vast and silvery, suspended as if the mist itself had hardened into form. They move with a grace that belies their bulk, drifting as though drawn along invisible currents. To watch them is to hear bells without clappers, notes struck by the very atmosphere itself. Fact anchors us here first. In the 19th century, long before airplanes, the dream of flight took the form of dirigibles and balloons. From the Montgolfier brothers in 1783 to Ferdinand von Zeppelin at the dawn of the 20th century, inventors and engineers experimented with lifting men into the sky by harnessing lighter-than-air gases. Dirigibles, with their rigid frames and steerable rudders, became icons of progress, carrying passengers across countries before the tragedies of accidents and war dimmed their promise. Newspapers of the 1890s even reported mysterious airship sightings across America, often described as cigar-shaped craft with searchlights, long before such designs were fully practical. Whether misidentified balloons or fevered imagination, the air was alive with rumor. The quirk in this story lies in the details of those sightings. Witnesses described not only the shape of the ships, but strange devices, propellers spinning without fuel, lights glowing without flame, hums in the air as though the ships were drinking directly from the sky. Some claimed the airships used atmospheric electricity, tapping into a power source all around us, free and boundless. The idea was not entirely fanciful. Nikola Tesla, working at the same time, dreamed of transmitting power wirelessly through the Earth's atmosphere, envisioning towers that could light the world without wires. His Wardenclyffe Tower rose on Long Island in the early 1900s, a steel skeleton meant to broadcast energy across continents. The project collapsed for lack of funding and perhaps feasibility, but the dream lingered like mist above a ruined fortress. And so, the debate begins. Were those airships glimpsed in the 1890s simply exaggerated tales, hoaxes amplified by eager newspapers? Or did they reflect prototypes of forgotten technologies, experiments in harnessing atmospheric electricity that never made it into official history? Mainstream historians lean toward the former. The physics of lighter-than-air flight is well documented. Hydrogen or hot air provides lift, engines provide thrust, and accidents were tragically common. But alternative thinkers insist on the latter, pointing to patents filed for unusual electrical devices, to rumors of inventions suppressed, to testimonies of lights in the sky that behaved unlike any known craft. Between the two voices lies a sky full of clouds, a place where bells echo but do not resolve. Here the Templar Bridge lends its method. The knights were not airship builders, but they knew what it meant to move safely through hostile terrain. A pilgrim could cross hundreds of miles under their protection, as if lifted above danger by an unseen hand. In that sense, airships are a modern echo of the same instinct, to rise above obstacles, to glide over forests and rivers rather than fight through them. The Templars standardized routes and currencies. Inventors dreamed of standardizing the sky itself, turning atmosphere into highway. Both are acts of faith in invisible forces. Trust in vows, trust in lift, trust in currents you cannot see but must believe will hold you. Think of the bells here as electric rather than bronze. A spark jumps between coils, and it rings with a tone only the air hears. Tesla once demonstrated lamps lit wirelessly, their filaments glowing without cords, a strange new choir of light. Imagine an airship strung with such lamps, glowing softly in the night sky, drifting like a floating cathedral. To see it would be to doubt your own senses, to wonder whether the bells of heaven had sent a chime into your valley. And yet, the facts remain stubborn. Tesla's tower never achieved its dream. Airships, for all their grandeur, proved vulnerable to storms, accidents, and flammable gases. The tragedy of the Hindenburg in 1937 sealed their reputation as majestic but doomed. Airplanes, with their faster speeds and sturdier designs, took the sky instead. Skeptics point out that there is no hidden history here, only a natural progression of technology, trial and error, success and failure. To claim otherwise, they argue, is to turn clouds into castles. But imagination is stubborn too. What if some of those airships were experiments that worked, however briefly? What if they tapped power sources we no longer use, not because they were impossible, but because they threatened existing empires of fuel and finance? What if history, like a ledger, has both visible entries and erased columns, bells that rang once, but whose echoes were silenced? The Templar Bridge does not answer. It only reminds us that secrecy and visibility often coexist, that some truths are guarded not by absence, but by design. Let your eyes close for a moment and picture the mist of evening. A field stretches wide, fireflies flicker, and above them glides a silent airship, its hull reflecting starlight. It hums softly, a vibration felt more than heard, as though the sky itself were singing. Inside, passengers lean at windows, marveling at how the world below looks small and still. There is no rush of engines, only the quiet ringing of bells far below, echoing from villages tucked into forests. The airship is not a weapon, not a secret plot, but a lullaby in motion, a floating dream that lets us imagine the sky itself as a road. The quirk of atmospheric electricity is that it still surrounds us. The air brims with ions, with fields and charges, invisible but real. Lightning proves its power, a bell struck by nature's own hand. Whether we ever truly harness it or not, the idea remains intoxicating. That energy could be as free as the air we breathe. That motion could be carried by currents unseen. Like the Templars carrying coins through forests of thieves, inventors imagined carrying power through skies of doubt. The bridge is not in the machines themselves, but in the faith that invisible forces can be trusted. And so, whether airships of mystery ever truly flew or not, they remain as symbols of possibility. They remind us that history is not just what happened, but what was dreamed. They tell us that bells can ring in clouds as well as cathedrals, that steel can rise into mist as well as anchor stone. They are, like so many of our stories, thresholds, doors to skies we may never fully enter but which we long to imagine. As we drift down from the clouds, let the bells grow quieter, their echoes mingling with the hum of currents. On the horizon waits another tower, a skeleton of steel once meant to light the world without wires. Our next bell will ring there, at Wardenclyffe, where Tesla's dream rose like a chapel of science, and where the debate over hidden knowledge deepens into questions of what is remembered and what is suppressed. The bells carry us from drifting airships down to a tower rising from the earth, its steel frame skeletal against the sky. Imagine Long Island in the early 1900s, the shoreline bristling with telegraph poles, the hum of invention alive in laboratories, and there, above it all, the strange sight of Wardenclyffe Tower. 187 feet of latticed steel topped with a copper dome, it stood like a chapel to unseen forces, its bells not bronze, but electrical discharges. To some it was the future made visible. To others, it was a folly, a dream too ambitious to hold. Fact anchors us first. The tower was the creation of Nikola Tesla, the Serbian-American inventor whose name still resonates with electricity. His plan was audacious: to transmit power wirelessly through the Earth's ionosphere, to make electricity as freely available as the air. In his vision, lamps would glow without cords, engines would run without fuel, communication would leap instantly across oceans. The tower was funded initially by financier J.P. Morgan, who hoped it would advance global communication. Construction began in 1901, and for a few years the skeleton stood ready, its coils humming with promise. But by 1906 funding collapsed, patents faltered, and the dream was abandoned. In 1917, the U.S. government ordered the tower demolished, fearing it might serve as a landmark for enemy submarines. Today, only the foundations remain, the ghost of a bell that rang once and fell silent. The quirk lies in Tesla himself, a man as mysterious as any legend. He was known to wander his laboratory at night, speaking to pigeons, claiming he could hear cosmic signals, sketching machines that seemed half mechanical, half dream. He filed patents for oscillators that some said caused earthquakes in New York, for bladeless turbines, for death rays and wireless lamps. Many of his ideas proved impractical or were never fully tested, yet they fed a mythos that continues to this day. Tesla, like the Templars before him, became more than a man. He became a door into speculation. Some call him a genius unrecognized, others a prophet suppressed, others still a visionary who leapt too far ahead of his time. And so the debate rises, as it always does when a dream falters. Was Wardenclyffe a project doomed by physics, or was it silenced by interests that feared free energy? Skeptics insist on the former. Wireless transmission of power on the scale Tesla imagined was and remains nearly impossible. plagued by inefficiency and practical limits. His grand claims outpaced his data, and when Morgan realized there was no profit in unlimited energy, he withdrew support. Engineers today regard Wardenclyffe as a fascinating experiment, not a hidden conspiracy. But to those who dream of suppressed knowledge, the story feels too neat. A tower meant to free the world falls to ruin, its plans scattered, its inventor discredited, and in its place rises a century of wires, meters, and monopolies. Did the bell of possibility ring once, only to be muffled forever? The Templar Bridge steadies us again. The knights knew that knowledge was not always shared freely. They guarded roots, relics, even financial systems, not to deny access, but to control it. In their ledgers, not every column was visible. Some entries were for the initiated only. Tesla's tower feels similar, a relic of hidden columns. Whether suppressed deliberately or simply forgotten, it has become a symbol of the knowledge that might have been, the energy grid that could exist if only the world had been willing. The tower was not a cathedral, but it had the same bones, steel rising like ribs, a dome like a bell waiting to be struck. It was a place of faith in the invisible, a temple to unseen power. One curious quirk in Tesla's demonstrations was his use of resonance. He believed that all matter had a natural frequency, and that by striking the right one, you could amplify energy without limit. He demonstrated lamps glowing from coils, sparks leaping across gaps like bells struck by lightning. He spoke of cymatics, of patterns that sound could carve into matter, as if the universe itself were a choir waiting for the right conductor. To watch him was to believe that steel and mist could sing together, that bells could ring in silence. But again, the debate cuts through. Was Tesla touching truths we have not yet fully grasped, or was he chasing illusions? Mainstream science has embraced some of his work, alternating current, radio technology, but left behind his wilder visions. Alternative thinkers hold fast to those visions, weaving them into tales of free energy suppressed by oil barons, of inventions hidden away in vaults, of patents quietly purchased and buried. Each version has its own logic, its own bell. Imagine standing by Wardenclyffe at night, when it still stood. The tower looms in mist, its dome glowing faintly with electrical discharge, sparks crackling like fireflies. Tesla walks below, coat flapping in the wind, his hands raised as if conducting the sky. Around you the forest hums faintly, leaves trembling with static, the air alive with invisible bells. You feel a tingling on your skin, a sense that the boundary between earth and atmosphere has thinned. For a moment it seems plausible that the world could indeed be lit without wires, that energy could flow like water, that history might have turned another way. The Templar motif returns here with gentle irony. Just as their treasure is said to have vanished into mist, so too Tesla's tower vanished, leaving only whispers. Just as their ledgers carried two columns, so too history carries two stories, one of impracticality, one of suppression. Both are incomplete, both are possible, and the truth may be less satisfying than either. The point is not to decide, but to listen, to let the bells toll in both directions. Let your eyelids grow heavy now, imagining the tower as it might have been, humming like a giant bell in the forest, its steel ribs glowing in the storm. The sound is low, resonant, almost like the toll of midnight prayers. Whether it was folly or foresight, the tower remains a symbol of what might have been. It stands in the same dreamscape as the pyramids and ziggurats, the star forts and airships, monuments to human faith in invisible forces. And from here, the bell guides us onward, away from towers, and into questions of scale. Why do so many older buildings have doorways taller than men, steps deeper than our stride, ceilings that dwarf us? Were these symbols of grandeur or remnants of something stranger? Our next bell will ring in marble halls and cathedral vaults, where sound and stone merge, and where whispers of giants mingle with echoes of ritual. The bells guide us down again, from towers humming with electricity to streets lined with stone facades. Mist curls low along the edges of plazas, softening the silhouettes of arches and columns. You step toward a building whose entrance looms so high that it seems made for someone larger than yourself. The doorway rises far above your head, its lintel nearly brushing the sky, while the staircase before it demands strides twice the length of your legs. For a moment, you feel small, not just in stature, but in history. As though the architects were not designing for people like you. They were building for giants. That impression has haunted travelers for centuries. From European cathedrals to American state houses, from the palaces of St. Petersburg to the civic buildings of Washington, D.C., the scale of architecture often seems exaggerated. Doors rise 3 or 4 times the height of a person. Staircases stretch so wide that processions seem to vanish within them. Halls echo with ceilings that hang like skies of stone. The facts tell us that these proportions were deliberate choices, meant to project power, dignity, and awe. The Renaissance and Baroque architects studied classical forms, reviving the grandeur of Rome and Greece, where scale was a language of empire. A monumental doorway was not meant for a giant. It was meant to remind ordinary men of the greatness of their rulers and their gods. But the quirk is how easily that symbolism slides into something stranger. Look closely at some of these doors, and you find their handles far above reach. Windows sit at odd heights. Stair risers feel awkwardly tall. In some buildings, especially those from the 17th through 19th centuries, furniture too seems oversized. Massive chairs, desks that rise like platforms, fireplaces large enough to stand inside. Newspapers of the 19th century occasionally printed stories of giant bones unearthed in fields or mines. Skulls said to be twice the size of a man's, femurs taller than a child. Most of these reports are now considered hoaxes, misidentified animal bones, or exaggerations born of sensation-hungry journalism. Yet they fed an image that perhaps once the world had inhabitants of a larger scale, and that our grandest architecture was their legacy, rather than ours. The debate finds fertile ground here. Skeptics are quick to point out that scale is psychology. A grand hall humbles the visitor, magnifying the authority of the institution. Tall doors symbolize openness to divine presence, not accommodation for oversized residents. Oversized furniture was often ceremonial, thrones designed to elevate rulers above subjects. As for giant bones, archaeologists trace them to mammoths, mastodons, or simply false reporting. There is no credible evidence of a race of giants building Europe's or America's monumental architecture. And yet, the feeling persists. Walk up steps that rise too high, and your body whispers that something is out of proportion. Your stride feels inadequate. The bells seem to toll in another key. The Templar Bridge crosses gently here. The knights themselves were not giants, though legends sometimes exaggerated their stature. What they knew, however, was ritual scale. In a Templar chapel, the altar might stand higher than the congregation, the choir loft placed so that voices rang above, the architecture arranged to remind men of their smallness before God. Scale was not about practicality. It was about psychology, about shaping emotion. In the same way, a grand courthouse or palace door that seems made for giants may simply be an echo of that tradition, a way to transform stone into a sermon. The Templars understood that a doorway could be a threshold of spirit as well as body. Still, there are quirks that resist easy answers. In certain Russian palaces, staircases seem almost absurdly elongated, requiring awkward steps. In some American frontier towns, photographs show buildings with doors disproportionately large compared to their occupants. While most explanations are practical, building reuse, design exaggeration, others invite speculation. Were some of these structures repurposed from earlier plans, their dimensions borrowed from traditions we no longer fully understand? Were they echoes of myths, architectural nods to biblical Nephilim or to the giants of folklore? Even if no bones of giants remain, their shadows linger in stone. If your eyes are heavy, imagine walking those halls at night. The bells of a cathedral have just tolled midnight, their echoes still humming in rafters 100 feet above. You step through a doorway that dwarfs you, into a chamber whose ceiling feels like a starry sky. The mist of incense hangs in the air, softening the light from candles. Your footsteps sound small, almost childlike, against flagstones that seem meant for longer strides. In that moment, you understand that architecture can make you dream. It can suggest presences larger than yourself, even if those presences are only symbols. The debate, as always, is not meant to resolve, but to soothe. Giants may be myths, their bones misread, their thrones symbolic. Or perhaps they are metaphors for the scale of our ancestors' ambitions, ambitions so vast they seem inhuman. Either way, the stone stands, the doors rise, the halls echo. The bells ring whether for giants or for men, and their sound is the same. A reminder that we are always smaller than the structures we build to honor our gods, our rulers, or our dreams. The Templar echo remains steady. They built not colossal palaces, but disciplined chapels, round churches echoing the Holy Sepulchre, fortified halls where knights prayed before battle. Yet even in their restraint, they knew the power of proportion. A narrow slit of window could make sunlight a sacred beam. A vaulted ceiling could lift voices like incense. They knew that architecture speaks, even in silence. That knowledge, like steel carried across forests, traveled into later centuries, shaping the way thresholds and halls were built, long after their order was gone. So let your mind linger in these oversized spaces. Feel the cool stone beneath your hands, the echo of your footsteps swallowed in high vaults. Picture thrones empty now, doors locked at night, staircases vanishing into darkness. In dreams, giants may still walk here, their strides fitting the steps, their voices filling the halls. Or perhaps the only giants are our own imaginations, stretching to fill the space our bodies cannot. As we leave the hall, the bells grow softer, blending with another kind of resonance. Not footsteps, not voices, but the music of stone itself. Domes that whisper, galleries that carry sound like water, chambers that hum when a note is struck. Our next bell will ring there, in marble that sings, where architecture becomes instrument, and where cymatics hint that sound itself may be the key to ancient mysteries. The bells linger as we step from vast doorways and long staircases into chambers where sound itself becomes the guide. Mist curls along marble floors, rising in faint threads as if drawn upward by invisible music. Here, in the domes and vaulted galleries of old architecture, stone does more than stand. It sings. Every whisper stretches further than it should. Every note lingers in the air like incense, refusing to fade. To walk into such a space is to hear silence transformed into an instrument. The facts are clear. Human beings have long known that architecture shapes sound. In the great cathedrals of Europe, from Notre Dame in Paris to St. Paul's in London, vaulted ceilings and stone walls create reverberations that extend for seconds after a note is sung. In the Hagia Sophia of Istanbul, the echoes are so rich that chants seem to hang in the air like bells, struck again and again. Even in older spaces, such as the Neolithic passage tomb of Newgrange in Ireland, archaeologists have noticed acoustics that amplify low-frequency sounds, perhaps deliberately designed for ritual. Sound is not an accident in these places. It is woven into the architecture, whether through intuition or calculation. The quirk appears in certain details that defy easy explanation. Take St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Beneath its great dome lies the Whispering Gallery, where a person can speak softly against the wall and be heard clearly more than 100 feet away on the opposite side. The curve of the dome guides sound like a secret messenger, carrying whispers across space as if the marble itself had ears. Or consider the baptistery of Pisa, where a single note sung beneath the dome blooms into chords as the reverberations overlap, creating harmonies that seem to come from nowhere. These effects may have been accidental at first, discovered by builders, and then cherished, but they create an impression of intentional magic. It is as though stone itself was tuned like a bell. And here's where debate enters, soft but persistent. Were ancient builders deliberately harnessing acoustic effects, or were they simply lucky? Skeptics insist on practicality. Domes and vaults were structural necessities designed to span wide spaces and support heavy loads. The acoustics were a byproduct, no more deliberate than the whistling of wind through battlements. Yet others argue that the repetition of such effects across cultures and centuries suggests intention. How could so many spaces, from Europe to Asia to the Americas, consistently produce resonant chambers if builders were not aware of sound as part of design? Were these places meant not only for sight and ceremony, but for sonic experiences that altered consciousness, guided prayer, or even healed? The Templar Bridge helps us balance the thought. The knights knew the rhythm of bells and chants, the way a litany repeated at dawn or dusk could steady the soul. Their chapels, though smaller than cathedrals, were aligned carefully, their stone walls carrying chants in ways that amplified devotion. They believed sound was a form of discipline, a way to guard the spirit as steel guarded the body. To them, the hum of voices in a chamber was as sacred as the gleam of relics. And so, when we step into a whispering gallery or a resonant dome, we can hear in it the same instinct, that architecture should not only house bodies, but also guide souls through sound. A quirk of history deepens the mystery. Ancient theories of music often connected sound to the cosmos. The Pythagoreans spoke of the music of the spheres, the idea that celestial bodies moved in harmonic ratios, creating a silent symphony. Medieval thinkers echoed this, believing that music mirrored divine order. In such a worldview, to build a chamber that resonated was to echo heaven itself. Cymatics, the modern science of sound creating patterns in sand or water, offers a visual proof of what ancients may have intuited. Strike a note, and grains of sand leap into geometric designs, mandalas of vibration. Could it be that domes and vaults were attempts, conscious or unconscious, to embody such patterns in stone? The debate is far from settled. Acoustic archaeologists today study sites from Chavindahuantar in Peru to Stonehenge in England, finding that many ancient spaces amplify or distort sound in striking ways. Some effects seem deliberate, others accidental. But whether by design or by serendipity, the experience remains the same. In these places, sound changes, and so do we. Whispers become sermons, chants become thunder, silence itself becomes a presence. Close your eyes now and imagine standing beneath a marble dome. A single monk begins to sing, his voice low and steady. The note climbs upward, curls along the stone, and returns as if joined by invisible choirs. Another voice joins, then another, until the chamber hums with harmonics that seem to come from the walls themselves. The air feels thicker, alive, as though mist were vibrating with the song. You breathe it in, and for a moment, your own heartbeat falls into rhythm with the sound. You are not merely listening, you are inside the song. The Templar bells toll here in sympathy. Their hours of prayer were measured not by clocks, but by chants, the same psalms repeated day after day. The stone chambers that held them were not passive shells. They were instruments resonating with devotion. To hear a bell in a tower was to hear steel and stone sing together. In that rhythm, knights found discipline, and discipline became their bridge across dangers. The domes and galleries of other builders carried the same message. Sound is not decoration, it is structure, a form of steel and mist woven into time. And so, the marble sings. Whether by accident or intention, whether as symbol or science, these spaces remind us that the world itself hums with resonance. Sound is invisible, like the forces Tesla dreamed of, like the trust pilgrims placed in nights, like the mist that wraps around towers at dawn. But invisible does not mean unreal. The whisper that carries across a gallery is proof enough. The grain of sand leaping into pattern is proof enough. The heart steadying to chant is proof enough. Let your eyes grow heavy now, listening to the silence that is not silent. Feel the echo in your own chest, the way each breath carries sound even when unvoiced. Imagine marble halls where whispers travel like secrets, where chants lift like incense, where bells toll in resonance with the sky. Whether or not builders meant it, the song remains, carved into stone and carried by air. And as we step out of these resonant halls, the bells guide us further still. From sound, we move into rhythm itself, into the patterns of night and day. Our next bell will ring in the chambers of sleep, where ancient people kept watch in segments, waking between dreams, as naturally as monks rising for midnight prayer. There, in the rhythm of segmented slumber, we may find another hidden harmony, another way in which time itself becomes a song. The bells do not only mark the hours of the day, they shape the hours of the night. In a world before electric light, before clocks glowed on every bedside table, human sleep was not a long, unbroken drift from dusk to dawn. Instead, it came in segments, in watches, like the tolling of a bell that rings twice rather than once. Step with me into a chamber of the past, where a hearth glows low, mist gathers along the rafters, and the rhythm of the night unfolds in 2 acts. The fact is well documented, though easily forgotten in our modern world. Historians of sleep, reading diaries, court records, and medical texts from medieval and early modern Europe, discovered that people often referred to a first sleep and a second sleep. The first began not long after sunset and lasted a few hours. Then came a waking interval in the middle of the night, sometimes lasting 1 or 2 hours, before people returned to bed for the second sleep, carrying them into dawn. The practice was so common that it appears in literature without explanation, as if everyone knew it. A 15th century medical manual even advised patients to use the time between sleeps for study or quiet contemplation. This segmented pattern was not abnormal. It was the norm. The quirk lies in what people did during those midnight hours. Some rose to stir the fire, banking embers into new life. Some prayed, their whispered psalms echoing faintly in stone chapels, bells marking matins or lauds in monasteries. Some wrote letters, lit by tallow candles, their ink strokes slow but steady in the hush. Others spoke with neighbors, or even visited each other, treating the night watch as a kind of social pause. Farmers might check on animals, couples might speak intimately, children might ask questions they were too shy to voice by day. It was a liminal time, neither fully waking nor fully dreaming, a misty bridge between 2 worlds. The debate is gentle but intriguing. Was segmented sleep a natural rhythm of the human body, suppressed only by modern lighting and schedules? Some scientists believe so. In experiments where people are removed from artificial light, they often revert to a pattern of 2 sleeps, with a period of quiet wakefulness in between. Others argue that the segmented rhythm was cultural, shaped by work patterns and the absence of reliable illumination. As gas lamps, then electricity, spread through cities, people gradually adopted a single consolidated sleep, the so-called modern 8 hours. Was this progress, or was it a departure from something more natural? The bell has not stopped ringing. It has only changed tone. Here the Templar Bridge resonates clearly. The knights were bound to the liturgy of the hours, prayers at fixed times through day and night, matins at midnight, lauds before dawn, prime at first light. Their sleep, too, was segmented by bells, their nights punctuated by vigils. They kept watch not only against enemies but against slumber itself, rising in darkness to chant psalms in stone chapels where sound lingered like mist. Their discipline echoes the rhythm of common folk, but with greater intensity. Where a farmer might wake to bank a fire, a knight might wake to pray before battle. The bell marked both, each in its own register. A curious quirk emerges in folklore. Many cultures spoke of the witching hour, the time between midnight and dawn when spirits were thought to roam more freely. If segmented sleep was the norm, then this was precisely when people were awake, alert, watchful, perhaps uneasy in the silence. In the half-light of embers, shadows lengthen, imagination stirs, and tales of ghosts or demons gain traction. Yet the same interval was also seen as sacred. Monks called it the hour of angels, when prayers rose purest into the stillness. The night watch thus carried twin faces, like a double-headed coin, fear and faith, darkness and devotion. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that waking. You stir from your first sleep, the room cool, the fire burned low. Mist seeps faintly at the edges of the shutters, carrying the smell of damp earth. You rise quietly, strike flint to coax the embers into flame, and the room glows again with orange light. Outside, you hear no traffic, no hum of wires, only the distant toll of a bell from a monastery on the hill. Perhaps you kneel to whisper a prayer. Perhaps you open a book of psalms. Perhaps you simply sit, listening to the night. An hour passes like a dream, and then you return to bed, sliding into your second sleep with a mind already soothed. Modern science has studied segmented sleep with interest. Some researchers note that the midnight interval often coincided with increased production of prolactin, a hormone that fosters relaxation and contentment. In other words, people in the middle of the night were not anxious but calm, their bodies prepared for a meditative state. Could it be that our ancestors, by waking naturally between sleeps, found a rhythm that balanced productivity, intimacy, and rest more gracefully than our modern consolidated nights? Or is it nostalgia, a romantic imagining of lives far harder than ours? The debate, like the mist, curls both ways. The Templar bells toll gently here, reminding us that rhythm is itself a form of protection. Just as knights kept watch in shifts through dark forests, so too did ordinary people keep a rhythm against the night. The bells were not only alarms or summons, they were lullabies and reassurances, marking time so that fear did not overwhelm silence. A segmented night was not broken. It was braided like the cords of a rope, stronger for its intertwining. Let your eyes soften now, as though you are waking in that interval. Picture yourself rising, not in anxiety, but in calm. You move through misty silence, hear bells toll softly across the valley, whisper a thought or prayer, sip warm drink from the hearth. Then gently you lie down again, and the second sleep embraces you like a deeper forest. In that rhythm, there is peace. In that watch, there is safety. And so, chapter 4 closes, with bells ringing across thresholds of scale and sound. From doorways tall as giants to domes that whisper, from marble that sings to nights divided by bells, we have walked among the architectures of grandeur and resonance. Each reminded us that human beings build not only for shelter, but for rhythm, for awe, for sound, for dreams. The bells follow us out of stone halls and night watches, into the clatter of iron wheels on tracks. Mist hangs over fields as the dawn whistle blows, and a train emerges, its black engine breathing steam like a restless beast. Behind it are rows of wooden cars, their windows filled not with passengers of comfort, but with the faces of children. Some look wide-eyed with wonder, some pale with fear, some simply tired, their hands clutching bundles of clothes. This is the orphan train, a chapter of history both well documented and yet strangely haunted, a movement of children across a continent as if society itself were attempting to reset. The facts are clear enough. Between 1854 and 1929, more than 250,000 children were transported from crowded cities in the eastern United States, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, into rural towns and farms in the Midwest and West. Many were orphans of disease, poverty, or abandonment. Some had living parents who could not support them and surrendered them to institutions. Charitable organizations, most notably the Children's Aid Society, founded by Charles Loring Brace, believed these children would find better lives with foster families on farms, far from the squalor of tenements. Trains carried them in groups, stopping at small towns where local families could choose a child to adopt or take in as labor. The quirk lies in the image itself. Lines of children presented at train depots, waiting to be selected like goods in a market. Some found loving homes, raised as sons and daughters. Others endured harsh labor, treated less as family than as servants. Records were often sparse, names changed, identities blurred. For some children, the orphan train was a blessing, a new life of stability. For others, it was a disappearance, a vanishing into farms where no one remembered their origins. The trains offered hope, but they also carried shadows. And here the debate blooms. Was the orphan train a noble attempt at social reform, or was it a mechanism of social erasure? Mainstream history emphasizes the former. The program was well-intentioned, guided by reformers who sought to address child poverty in a nation struggling with industrialization and immigration. Yet alternative thinkers see in it the echo of something stranger. To them, the mass relocation of children looks like evidence of a deeper reset. If whole cities were altered in the 19th century, streets razed, windows buried, towers demolished, perhaps orphan trains were part of a larger effort to repopulate and disguise a catastrophic upheaval. Without parents to testify, children's memories would fade, their origins erased, their new lives seamlessly integrated into the rewritten landscape. Skeptics shake their heads. They point to archives filled with records, letters, photographs. They remind us that child poverty in 19th century cities was real and acute, that reformers were desperate for solutions. To see conspiracy in the orphan trains, they argue, is to miss the human tragedy of poverty and the imperfect attempts to address it. But for those who look at half-buried windows and vanished names on maps, the trains appear too convenient, too symbolic. Two voices speak at once, one of reform, one of erasure. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between the bells. Here the Templar Bridge returns, not with steel at a pilgrim's side, but with the method of guardianship. The knights once escorted travelers across dangerous lands, carrying them safely between cities. The orphan trains, in a strange and secular way, echoed that instinct, carrying vulnerable children from one life to another, from danger to safety, or at least the hope of safety. But where the Templars kept ledgers to ensure trust, the orphan trains often left no such records. The children were delivered, but their stories dissolved into mist. The bells rang once, and then silence. A curious quirk of symbolism deepens the resonance. Trains are themselves liminal spaces, neither here nor there, doors on wheels carrying passengers across thresholds. For the children aboard, the train was more than transport. It was a portal between identities. They boarded as orphans of crowded cities. They disembarked as sons and daughters of farms, their past lives folded into shadow. In that sense, the trains resemble thresholds in Templar stories, gates to new lands, passages guarded by vows. But these gates were not guarded. They were open, and the children had no choice but to walk through. Imagine the scene if your eyes are heavy. A rural station in Kansas, mist rising off the fields, bells tolling faintly from a nearby church. The train doors open, and children step down, clutching their small bundles. Townsfolk wait, their faces curious, calculating. A boy is chosen quickly, his strong arms promising help in the fields. A girl hesitates, then is led away by a woman who hopes for companionship in her empty house. Another child remains unchosen, to ride on to the next stop. The train whistle blows, echoing like a long bell across the prairie. Steam rises, mist curls, and the children vanish into the horizon. The debate softens if we let it. Perhaps the orphan trains were neither conspiracy nor salvation, but both at once. Acts of charity mixed with exploitation. Solutions entangled with silence. They are reminders that history often carries two truths at once, debit and credit in the same ledger. The Templars would have understood that balance. They knew that to guard was not always to save, that to carry a cross was sometimes to lose. And so the trains roll on in memory, their wheels echoing like bells across iron tracks. They remind us that societies, like cities, sometimes rebuild themselves not only in stone, but in people. Streets can be razed, names can vanish from maps, children can be dispersed into new families, and yet the rhythm continues. Whether we call it progress or reset depends on which column of the ledger we read. As we step off the platform, the bells follow us into another gathering place. Not trains this time, but lodges. Symbols hang on walls, rituals unfold in candlelight, and whispers of secret brotherhoods linger in the air. Our next bell will ring among fraternal orders, where odd fellows and Freemasons carried traditions that borrowed freely from the myths of knights and guardians. There, too, we will find echoes of Templar bells, resonating across centuries in halls of secrecy and song. The bells follow the trains into quieter places, where no whistles blow and no steam hisses. Instead, the sound is muted, enclosed within thick-walled halls. Mist curls around the eaves of wooden lodges and stone meeting houses, where lamps burn low and symbols are carved above the door. You step closer and see 3 rings intertwined, or the square and compass, or a lantern flanked by pillars. These are the signs of fraternal orders, societies that once filled towns and cities with ritual, charity, and secrecy. To enter is to pass from daylight into candlelight, from ordinary life into the half-lit realm of oaths and mysteries. The facts are straightforward. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, organizations like the Freemasons, Oddfellows, and Foresters flourished across Europe and America. They offered fellowship, mutual aid, and a sense of belonging in rapidly changing societies. In an age before widespread social safety nets, lodges provided sickness benefits, funeral expenses, and community for widows and orphans. Their rituals borrowed heavily from older traditions, biblical imagery, medieval guild symbols, echoes of knightly vows. In some towns, nearly every man belonged to one order or another, and lodge halls stood proudly alongside churches and courthouses. But the quirk is how deeply these organizations steeped themselves in symbols that seemed to reach back into older ages. Freemasons traced their lore to the builders of Solomon's Temple. Oddfellows claimed ancient origins of brotherhood, and many groups borrowed Templar imagery: the cross, the sword, the white mantle, the very language of guardianship. Rituals were enacted with robes and regalia, candles lit in careful sequences, passwords and handshakes exchanged like relics of hidden continuity. Outsiders might see little more than theatrical play, but insiders swore that the rituals bound them to something larger than themselves, to a lineage of guardians stretching into misty antiquity. Here debate enters, as it always does. Were these orders truly inheritors of ancient secrets, or were they products of imagination, crafting myths of continuity to lend weight to their fellowship? Skeptics insist on the latter. The origins of Freemasonry, they point out, can be traced fairly clearly to stonemason guilds of the Middle Ages, later transformed into speculative philosophy societies in the 17th century. The Odd Fellows likely began as friendly societies in 18th century England. Their rituals were compiled, not inherited. Their symbols assembled from biblical, classical, and medieval motifs. And yet, the persistence of those motifs raises questions. Why did the imagery of knights and temples, of secrecy and vows, resonate so strongly across centuries? Was it coincidence, or was it the echo of something remembered, however dimly? The Templar Bridge lies obvious here. Even after their order was suppressed in the 14th century, their aura lingered. Legends of hidden treasure, secret rituals, and unbroken bloodlines spread through Europe. By the time lodges arose in the 17th and 18th centuries, Templar imagery was ripe for adoption. To wear a cross upon one's chest, to swear an oath before candles, to march in processions beneath banners. It all carried the weight of those earlier guardians. Whether or not there was a direct line of inheritance, the symbolism itself acted as a bridge, carrying meaning from the Middle Ages into the modern world. The lodges did not need Templar relics to feel Templar echoes. The bells of secrecy rang on, even if the clappers had been replaced. A curious quirk lies in how these lodges interacted with society at large. On the one hand, they were open, their halls prominent in towns, their charity visible. On the other, they were secretive, their rituals hidden, their symbols obscure. This tension made them fertile ground for suspicion. Conspiracy theories blossomed, that Masons controlled governments, that Odd Fellows practiced occult rites, that fraternal orders served as vessels for ancient powers. Most historians dismiss such claims, pointing instead to their practical role as mutual aid societies. Yet the secrecy itself invited speculation, just as a locked door invites wonder about what lies behind it. Close your eyes and imagine stepping into one of these halls. The lamps are low, smoke from oil and candle mixing with mist that seems to have followed you indoors. Members stand in robes, their symbols gleaming faintly on medallions and sashes. A bell tolls, not loudly but firmly, marking the beginning of ritual. Words are spoken, oaths sworn, hands clasped in grips known only to the initiated. Outside, the world carries on, factories clanging, trains running, markets bustling. But inside, time feels slower, older, as though you have entered a forest where bells echo in strange patterns. The debate softens when framed as metaphor. Perhaps the lodges did not inherit ancient secrets in the literal sense. Perhaps what they inherited was the human need for continuity, the desire to feel part of a lineage older than oneself. In times of upheaval, symbols of guardianship and vows provide stability. The Templar imagery, whether adopted or inherited, offered exactly that. A reminder that life is not only commerce and toil, but also mystery and duty. The lodges kept alive a sense of the sacred within the secular, bells ringing softly beneath the noise of progress. And so the lodges in the mist remain, even as their prominence has faded. Many still meet. Their halls still echo with ritual, though membership has dwindled. Their symbols linger in town squares, carved above doors, painted on old signboards. They are thresholds of memory, places where steel and oath, bell and candle, mist and secrecy were woven into the fabric of ordinary lives. Whether they carried true Templar secrets or only the echo of Templar imagery, they kept the rhythm alive. The bells rang on. As we leave the hall, the air outside feels cooler, the mist thicker. The bells guide us not to secrecy this time, but to spectacle, to a portal glimpsed in modern ritual. On a winter night in Russia, in the glare of cameras, an Olympic ring fails to open during a grand ceremony, as though a gate had closed itself against the world's gaze. Our next bell will ring there, at Sochi, where symbolism slipped and speculation bloomed, and where the idea of portals, between times, between worlds, takes the stage once more. The bells guide us from candlelit lodges into the glare of stadium lights, from whispered oaths into the thunder of applause. Mist curls above the Black Sea on a cold February night in 2014, when the world's eyes turn to Sochi for the Winter Olympics. The opening ceremony was meant to be a spectacle of precision. Dancers, projections, and symbols choreographed into a hymn of national pride. And then, in front of billions of viewers, something faltered. 5 glowing snowflakes were designed to unfold into the 5 Olympic rings, the universal symbol of global games. But only 4 opened. The 5th remained frozen, an unblinking star that refused to complete the circle. The fact is simple. A mechanical malfunction prevented one of the rings from expanding. Organizers later joked about it. Russian television edited it, and the games went on without pause. To engineers and stage managers, it was an inconvenience, nothing more. But the image of 4 rings glowing while the 5th stayed shut became instantly iconic, a quirk of spectacle lodged in collective memory. For many, it was a reminder that even in an age of technology, not everything obeys command. The mist still interferes, the bell still misses a beat. The quirk deepens when we consider how viewers interpreted the moment. Some saw it as irony, a symbol of imperfection in a show meant to dazzle. Others saw it as omen, a broken circle, a portal unopened, a gate that refused to reveal what lay beyond. Conspiracy forums lit up with speculation. Was it a deliberate signal? A hidden message in plain sight? A reminder that certain doors remain closed no matter how grand the stage? The failure of a mechanism became, for many, a metaphor. And so the debate begins. Was the unopened ring just a malfunction? Or was it something more? Mainstream voices dismiss speculation. The Olympic ceremony was massive, complex, filled with moving parts. Failures are inevitable in live performance. To read cosmic meaning into a frozen snowflake is to mistake accident for design. Yet others argue that public rituals often carry layers of symbolism, conscious or unconscious. A circle incomplete, displayed to the world, resonates with archetypes older than the games themselves. The portal that did not open feels like a bell struck but muted, an echo that lingers precisely because it was denied. Here the Templar Bridge enters quietly. The knights knew the power of ritual before an audience. Their processions through towns, their banners unfurled in battle, their solemn vows spoken in chapels, all were performances as much as devotions. A banner dropped, a relic unveiled, a bell tolled out of rhythm. Such moments carried weight beyond their practical meaning. They understood that failure in ritual could itself become a message, a sign of divine displeasure or hidden mystery. In that sense, the unopened ring in Sochi echoes a medieval sensibility, the idea that when a ritual falters, it reveals a truth the performers did not intend. A curious quirk makes the image even stranger. In Russian folklore, circles and rings often symbolize gateways, thresholds to other realms. Fairy tales speak of magical circles drawn on the ground to summon spirits or protect against them. Orthodox icons depict halos as rings of light, portals of holiness. To see a ring remain closed in such a context stirs something older than the Olympics, something woven into cultural memory. A gate that does not open may be safer, but it also leaves a question hanging in the air. What would have come through if it had? If your eyes are heavy, imagine sitting in that stadium. The lights flare, music swells, dancers whirl, and 4 glowing rings expand majestically in the sky. Then you wait, breath held, for the 5th. It flickers, strains, and remains still. The audience gasps, then laughs nervously, then cheers anyway, but you feel something else, a silence behind the noise, a bell that should have rung but did not. In that pause, the mist thickens. You wonder if a door has closed in some unseen corridor, if a threshold has been denied. The debate softens if framed as metaphor. Perhaps the unopened ring symbolizes the limits of spectacle, a reminder that technology does not conquer uncertainty. Perhaps it represents the gaps in global unity, a missing piece in the promise of harmony. Or perhaps it is simply a snowflake that refused to change shape on cue. The meaning depends not on mechanics, but on how we listen to the bell. Some hear silence, others hear resonance. The Templars would have smiled knowingly at this. They understood that symbols live not in perfection, but in echoes. A ritual completed flawlessly is impressive, but a ritual disrupted is unforgettable. Their own suppression in 1307, carried out with brutal efficiency, became the seed of centuries of myth precisely because it felt unfinished, as if a vow had been broken but not erased. The unopened ring at Sochi carries a similar aura, a symbol incomplete, lingering in memory longer than success would have. And so the unopened ring becomes a kind of modern portal, not into other realms, but into speculation. It invites us to imagine thresholds we cannot see, gates half drawn in mist. It reminds us that not all circles close, not all bells toll, not all rituals obey. And in that reminder lies a strange comfort, for if every door opened, mystery would vanish. If every bell rang, silence would lose its meaning. If every ritual succeeded, there would be no room for wonder. Let your eyes soften now, imagining 5 snowflakes drifting in the dark. 4 bloom into glowing rings, bright and complete. The 5th remains still, crystalline, its pattern hidden. The mist curls around it, bells toll faintly, and you drift toward sleep, wondering what doors remain unopened in your own life. The spectacle fades, but the echo remains. And from here, the bells guide us further east, into the wide Siberian wilderness. There, in forests older than cities, lights have been seen in the sky, strange shapes moving without sound, whispers of visitors not of this world. Our next bell will ring above taiga and tundra, where portals are not staged but glimpsed in raw wilderness, and where the imagination of giants and strangers fills the night sky. The bells follow us away from stadium lights and ceremonies into wilderness. Mist thickens as we travel east. beyond cities and steeples, into the vast Siberian tundra. The forest stretches endless, a sea of pines and birches shrouded in fog. The ground is hard, the air sharp, and silence seems to toll louder than any bell. It is here, in this raw immensity, that strange tales gather, stories of lights in the night sky, of visitors that leave no trace, of giants remembered in whispers, and of names older than scripture, Gog and Magog, guardians or destroyers, at the edge of the world. The facts anchor us first. Siberia is no stranger to mysteries of the sky. In 1908, the Tunguska event flattened over 800 square miles of forest, trees felled as if by an invisible hand. The explosion, likely caused by a meteor or comet fragment, released energy greater than the Hiroshima bomb. Yet no crater was found, only scorched trunks and silence. Eyewitnesses described a fireball crossing the dawn sky, followed by shock waves that shattered windows hundreds of miles away. It was, scientifically, a natural event. Yet in memory, it became more than that. A scar in the forest, a bell that rang once and still echoes. The quirk emerges in more recent reports. Throughout the 20th century, Siberia became a hotbed of UFO sightings. Pilots, hunters, and villagers told of glowing orbs that hovered silently, of disc-shaped craft darting faster than any plane, of beams of light piercing misty forests. Some accounts described figures, tall and indistinct, glimpsed at the edges of settlements. Skeptics call these misidentifications of natural phenomena: ball lightning, auroras, aircraft. Believers see portals opening briefly in the wilderness, thresholds where other worlds brush against our own. The forest becomes a deep cathedral, its bells rung not by bronze, but by lights above the treetops. And here, the debate sharpens. Are these stories folklore amplified by isolation, or fragments of encounters that resist explanation? Siberia's remoteness means fewer witnesses, fewer photographs, fewer verifiable records. Yet that very remoteness lends weight to the persistence of tales. Why do so many describe the same glowing orbs, the same silent movements, the same sense of being watched? The tundra is vast enough to swallow truth and rumor alike, leaving only mist. Into this mist step older names: Gog and Magog. In biblical and Quranic traditions, they are nations or figures of chaos, unleashed at the end of days to test humanity. Medieval maps place them at the edges of the known world, behind walls or mountains, waiting. Some legends tied them to the wild north beyond the Caspian, in lands not unlike Siberia. To invoke their names in stories of strange lights and tall figures is to connect the modern with the ancient, to imagine that the portals of the tundra are not new, but echoes of prophecies older than history. Here the Templar Bridge resonates. The knights knew the power of borderlands, places where maps faded into blankness. They guarded routes into deserts and forests, always aware that beyond the horizon lay danger or revelation. They prayed against the forces of Gog and Magog, the enemies invoked in apocalyptic psalms. They would have recognized Siberia as such a threshold, vast, uncharted, a place where bells echo without source. The UFOs of the 20th century, the giants of folklore, the prophecies of scripture, all converge in the same space, a liminal wilderness that resists certainty. A curious quirk deepens the resonance. In the Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959, 9 hikers perished mysteriously in the Ural Mountains, on the edge of Siberia. Their tent was found slashed open from within, their bodies scattered, some with strange injuries. Theories range from avalanche to military tests to more speculative explanations. Among them, lights in the sky seen by other witnesses that same night. Though no definitive answer exists, the story adds another toll to the bell of Siberian mystery. If your eyes are heavy, imagine standing alone in that forest. Mist curls around the trunks. The air is silent except for the faint rustle of branches. Then, above the canopy, a glow appears. At first you think it is the moon, but it moves, drifts, hums faintly. The light brightens, and you feel your skin prickle, as though the air itself has charged. A shape glides silently across the stars, vanishing into the horizon without a sound. You are left with nothing but the echo of bells in your chest, the sense that a door opened briefly and then closed. The debate, as always, offers two voices. Skeptics point to natural explanations, to the vastness of Siberia and the human tendency to weave stories from fear and awe. Believers point to consistency, to the way lights and figures recur across decades and cultures. Between them lies the mist, the same mist that curls in cathedrals and beneath fortresses, the same mist that hides both truth and wonder. The Templars remind us that thresholds are not meant to be fully crossed. Some gates remain closed, some portals only glimpsed. The unopened Olympic ring, the UFO light in the forest, the prophecy of Gog and Magog, each is a reminder that mystery endures, that bells sometimes ring without revealing their source. To guard such mysteries is not to solve them, but to keep them alive, to let them continue tolling across centuries. And so, the giants of the tundra remain in story, whether as Nephilim, aliens, or shadows of fear. The lights in the sky remain unexplained, whether as plasma or portal. Gog and Magog remain unbound, waiting at the edges of imagination. The forest hums with silence, the mist deepens, and the bells toll faintly in the distance. Let your eyes close now, as if you were a traveler bedding down in a Siberian hut. Outside, the wind stirs the trees, and perhaps just faintly, a glow passes over the snow. You are safe, but the world feels larger, older, stranger. Sleep comes, and with it the sense that giants may still stride in the deep forest, unseen, but not forgotten. And from here the bells will change their tone. The mist begins to clear, and we hear voices not of legend but of reason, skeptics who remind us to tread carefully, to distinguish between history and imagination. Our next bell will ring in the voices of debunkers who caution us against letting dreams turn to dogma. For even as we dream, we must remain awake to the risks of mist made too solid. The bells soften now, tolling not with grandeur, but with reason. Their sound is steadier, like iron striking iron, the rhythm of hammers in workshops where clarity is forged. Mist still curls in the air, but here it thins, parting to reveal voices that refuse to lose themselves in shadows. These are the voices of doubt, of scholars, engineers, and skeptics, who remind us that wonder is not proof, and that mist, when condensed too quickly, may obscure more than it reveals. The fact of the matter is this: much of what has been called hidden history has other explanations, grounded in evidence and records. Take the so-called mud flood. To believers, the buried windows and half-sunken doors of cities like Seattle, Chicago, Paris, and London suggest a sudden cataclysm in the 19th century, an event that reset civilization. But engineers and historians point to something simpler: urban infrastructure. Streets were raised deliberately to install sewers and combat flooding. Buildings constructed before this elevation found their original ground floors submerged, their windows staring sideways into earth, their doors leading into basements. In Seattle, records describe the project clearly, complete with diagrams and civic ordinances. The mud flood, say the skeptics, is not evidence of disaster, but of sanitation reform, a triumph of steel jacks and civic will. The quirk here is that the buried windows still look uncanny. Even knowing the explanation, it is difficult not to feel unease when you see them. A child walking past may wonder why a window stares into dirt, why a door stands below the sidewalk. Skeptics acknowledge this uncanny feeling but caution us not to mistake sensation for evidence. Curiosity is natural, they say, but truth often wears simpler clothes than mystery would prefer. Another voice of doubt addresses Tartary, the empire that seems to vanish from maps in the 19th century. To believers, this disappearance is evidence of suppression, a civilization erased. But historians explain that Tartary was never a unified empire at all. It was a catch-all term used by Europeans to describe vast, poorly understood lands in Central and Northern Asia, inhabited by diverse peoples: Tatars, Mongols, Siberian tribes. As knowledge improved and maps grew more precise, the vague label Tartary gave way to more accurate names: Russia, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Siberia. Its disappearance is not erasure, skeptics insist, but refinement. The bell did not fall silent, it merely changed its note. The debate grows sharper when it comes to giants. Folklore across the world speaks of Nephilim, of great warriors, of beings taller than towers. 19th century newspapers sometimes printed stories of giant skeletons unearthed in fields or burial mounds, complete with exaggerated measurements. Believers see in these reports evidence of a race of giants whose traces have been hidden. Skeptics counter that these were hoaxes, journalistic fabrications designed to sell papers in a competitive market. Some bones were misidentified mastodon remains, others pure invention. Museums and universities, they say, have never found verifiable remains of giant humans. The doorways and staircases that feel too tall? Ceremonial scale, designed to awe, not to accommodate. The bells of proportion ring in psychology, not in biology. The Templar Bridge enters here, steady as always, reminding us that even doubt requires guardianship. The Knights knew the value of discipline, of separating rumor from duty. They lived in a world of visions and relics, of miracles claimed and doubted. To survive, they balanced faith with order. In the same way, debunkers act as guardians of clarity, carrying knowledge across the forest of speculation. Their steel is reason, their bells the steady toll of evidence, their mist the caution that lingers even when mysteries tempt us forward. Yet doubt itself carries quirks. For every skeptic who explains, another skeptic questions whether the explanation satisfies. Mud floods explained by raised streets, yes, but why do similar patterns appear in cities far apart? Tartary as a cartographic label, yes, but why did it persist so long, and why did it vanish so abruptly? Giants as hoaxes, yes, but why did the hoaxes resonate so strongly with readers? Even in debunking, the mist never fully clears. The bells of doubt toll clearly, but their echoes still drift into the forest. Close your eyes and imagine sitting in a study, candlelight flickering against shelves of books. A historian pores over maps, tracing the shifting boundaries of Tartary. An engineer draws diagrams of sewer systems, explaining how streets rose foot by foot. A scientist measures bones, identifying mastodons where others saw giants. Their voices are calm, steady, the toll of bells in iron. Outside the window, mist gathers, and the deep forest waits. For even as reason explains, mystery endures. The bells ring both ways. The debate softens when framed as balance. Without skeptics, we risk drifting into fantasies that harden into dogma. Without dreamers, we risk losing the wonder that drives discovery. The mud flood may be engineering, but curiosity about it leads us to learn how cities were built. Tartary may be a label, but its mystery leads us to maps and migrations. Giants may be myths, but their stories lead us to archaeology and paleontology. Each side needs the other, debit and credit, bell and silence, steel and mist. The Templars, were they here, would nod. They carried relics, some perhaps dubious, but guarded them with steel discipline. They marched under banners heavy with symbolism, yet lived by rules as strict as any ledger. They knew that faith and reason were not enemies, but companions on the road. In their rhythm, the bells tolled for both devotion and order. And so too in our rhythm, the voices of doubt do not silence mystery. They temper it, shape it, keep it from overwhelming us. Let your eyes soften now, hearing the bells toll in reason's key. Imagine the calm voice of a scholar explaining patiently, the steady hand of an engineer sketching clearly, the precise gaze of a scientist classifying bones. Their work is not cold, it is protective, like knights at the edge of a forest, keeping the path clear. Their bells are steady, and in their steadiness you may drift into sleep, comforted that not all mist need be feared. And from here, the bells guide us gently into reflection. For if doubt steadies us, dream still beckons. What use is mystery if we dismiss it entirely? What harm in allowing wonder to linger so long as we know its nature? Our next bell will ring in that space between doubt and dream, in the soft hope that imagination can inspire renewal, not deception. There we will consider how to dream without losing clarity, how to let mist drift without letting it choke. The bells that rang with reason now soften, fading into a gentler chime. The voices of doubt are not silenced, but they step back into the mist, leaving room for another voice to rise, a voice not of denial, but of possibility. For once the ground has been cleared of confusion, the imagination may return not as dogma, but as dream. To doubt is to steady the path. To dream after doubt is to see where the path might lead. Fact still anchors us. We know that civilizations have risen, fallen, and risen again. The ruins of Mesopotamia, the temples of Egypt, the cathedrals of Europe, the star forts and towers, all testify to cycles of building and forgetting. Archaeologists have traced patterns of collapse caused by climate shifts, invasions, diseases, and economic strains. History is not a straight ascent, but a rhythm, like bells tolling in sequence: rise, fall, renewal. This truth is not speculation. It is woven into the record of humanity. The quirk emerges in how we respond to this rhythm. Some see only decline, a story of grandeur lost, towers crumbled, bells fallen silent. Others see opportunity, that from collapse comes reinvention, from forgetting comes rediscovery. The Renaissance itself was a dream after doubt, a revival of ancient learning filtered through medieval skepticism. Today, when we uncover echoes of older knowledge, whether in acoustics that heal, geometry that resonates, or energy that hums invisibly, we are not bound to believe in suppressed empires or giants. We are invited instead to imagine how fragments of wisdom might still enrich us. The debate softens here, because it is not about proving or disproving. It is about posture, about how we choose to stand before the mist. Skeptics remind us that Tartary was a cartographic label, not a hidden empire. Dreamers imagine what might happen if we looked at the maps less literally. As metaphors for vastness, we still struggle to comprehend. Skeptics tell us that mud floods were urban planning, not cataclysm. Dreamers see in them a symbol of how easily civilizations can be reshaped, how memory itself can be buried and raised again. Skeptics say giants are myth. Dreamers reply that grandeur can live in architecture, in imagination, in the stories we tell children. Each bell strikes differently, but together they create harmony. Here the Templar Bridge glows brightest. For the knights lived precisely in this tension, disciplined doubt and radiant faith. They obeyed strict rules, carried ledgers, followed orders of steel. Yet they also dreamed of Jerusalem, of holy relics, of mysteries older than themselves. They were guardians of both fact and hope, living proof that skepticism and imagination need not be enemies. The bells that told them awake for prayer were real, bronze and iron. But the bells they heard in their hearts, calls to glory, visions of eternity, were dreams. And both rang together. A curious quirk of modern life makes the bridge clearer. Science and imagination are often presented as opposites, yet some of our greatest discoveries began as dreams. Submarines appear in Jules Verne before they appeared in harbors. Rockets appear in stories before they touched the moon. Wireless communication was once fantasy before Tesla sparked coils into song. To dream after doubt is not to believe uncritically, but to let imagination inspire questions, experiments, new paths. Steel anchors us, but mist moves us forward. Bells toll both ways. If your eyes are heavy, imagine walking through a deep forest at twilight. The mist thickens, but instead of fear, you feel calm. You know the bells will guide you. Ahead, you hear two tones ringing together, one deep and steady, like iron, one light and wavering, like wind through branches. Together, they form harmony. You realize that the forest is not a place of confusion, but of renewal, where old paths meet new. You walk calmly, each step carrying you deeper into sleep, each bell carrying you further into dream. The hopeful speculation here is simple, yet profound. What if the grandeur of old civilizations is not lost, but waiting in fragments? What if acoustic wisdom could help us design spaces that heal anxiety through resonance? What if geometry could inspire sustainable architecture, cities aligned with the rhythms of sun and wind? What if our fascination with portals and thresholds is not about aliens or giants, but about reminding ourselves that imagination itself is a doorway? The dream after doubt is not that history hides a lost empire, but that history offers metaphors, guides, whispers. If we listen with balance, we can carry those whispers forward. The Templars would approve. They knew the power of relics, not because relics were magical, but because they inspired. To kneel before a fragment of wood believed to be from the cross was to kneel before the possibility of faith. In the same way, to contemplate a star fort as both cannon defense and mandala is to contemplate how practicality and beauty intertwine. To see a mud-flooded window is to be reminded not of cataclysm, but of resilience. The way cities rise, adapt, continue. Dream after doubt does not deny the skeptic's voice. It harmonizes with it, creating a chord strong enough to carry us forward. And so the bells toll gently now, not with alarm, not with argument, but with invitation. The steel of reason stands firm, the mist of imagination drifts soft, and the two together form a bridge across the forest of uncertainty. To cross it is not to escape history, but to live more fully within it, carrying both clarity and wonder. Let your eyelids soften as you picture the bells ringing above a forest clearing, mist rising around their sound. One bell is iron, steady. One is silver, elusive. Together they ring you deeper into calm, reminding you that both truth and dream belong in the same night. And from here the bells guide us toward the final threshold. For once we have dreamed after doubt, we may ask, how do we carry that dream forward? How do we build a future that honors both reason and imagination, steel and mist, bells and silence? Our next bell will ring in the vision of renewal, where the fragments of past knowledge inspire the possibilities of tomorrow. The bells toll softly now, not with warning, not with skepticism, but with promise. Their notes carry through the mist like distant chimes in a deep forest, calling us forward into dawn. We have walked among ruins and mysteries, listened to skeptics and dreamers alike. Now, with both steel and mist in hand, we step toward renewal, not by recreating the past, but by letting its fragments guide us into the future. Fact anchors us first. Civilizations before us have faced collapse and rebirth. The fall of Rome did not end law, language, or roads. Fragments carried forward into medieval Europe. The fall of the Mayan cities did not erase astronomy or agriculture. Knowledge persisted among descendants. Even when Alexandria's library burned, manuscripts survived in monasteries and in the Islamic Golden Age, where scholars preserved and expanded upon Greek philosophy. History shows that even when towers crumble, bells still ring somewhere. Renewal is not invention from nothing. It is inheritance reimagined. The quirk lies in how modern life already mirrors ancient whispers. Consider acoustic design. Architects today experiment with soundscapes in hospitals, shaping halls to soothe rather than echo, an echo of domes that once amplified chants. Consider sustainable cities. Designers align buildings to capture solar energy and channel wind, not unlike temples aligned to solstices or pyramids to the stars. Even virtual reality classrooms, where students walk through digital reconstructions of Uruk or Giza, echo the clay tablets and stone carvings that once preserved knowledge for future eyes. We are, in ways subtle and profound, renewing fragments of the old in forms the ancients would not recognize, but might still understand. The debate softens here, for it is less about whether this renewal is literal or mythical, and more about how we choose to approach it. Some argue that our fascination with suppressed civilizations distracts from real lessons: climate adaptation, social resilience, the ethics of technology. Others reply that myth and speculation inspire curiosity, and curiosity fuels progress. Even if Tartary was only a name on maps, it sparks imagination about forgotten peoples. Even if giants never walked our streets, The thought pushes us to consider scale, proportion, ambition. Even if airships never drank from the sky, Tesla's dream reminds us that energy could be freer, cleaner. The mist does not need to be solid to inspire. Here, the Templar Bridge becomes luminous. The Knights did not invent the cross, nor the relics they carried, nor the roads they guarded, but they gathered fragments, organized them, and carried them forward. Their ledgers, their chapels, their steel, all were renewals, taking what existed and shaping it into something enduring. In the same way, we today can act as wardens of fragments. A whisper of cymatics becomes an exploration of sound therapy. A suspicion of lost maps becomes an inquiry into cultural erasure. A story of portals becomes a metaphor for thresholds of discovery. The bells toll not to summon armies, but to awaken imagination, tempered by reason. Imagine, if your eyes are heavy, a city of tomorrow shaped by these lessons. Streets curve like star forts, both defensive and beautiful. Halls hum with resonance that calms the anxious marble tuned to human breath. Towers rise, not to dominate, but to harvest energy from sun and sky, humming faintly like Tesla's dream reborn. In parks, families gather to hear bells that ring not just the hour, but harmonic tones designed to soothe, tones carried through misted fountains that shimmer in evening light. The city is not utopia. It has problems, disagreements, imperfections, but it is renewed by fragments, steel and stone arranged with reverence for rhythm, bells guiding lives not with tyranny, but with harmony. A curious quirk is already visible in small places. Communities experiment with eco-villages, designing homes aligned with seasons, water flows, and communal rhythm. Musicians experiment with architecture, turning performance halls into instruments themselves. Engineers sketch prototypes of airborne turbines, recalling airships that once drifted through dream. These are not fantasies hidden in vaults. They are practical steps inspired by misty echoes. Renewal, it seems, is already underway, quietly, steadily, like bells tolling at dawn when few are awake to hear. The debate between skeptic and dreamer becomes less adversarial here. The skeptic ensures the city stands, its steel strong, its bridges secure. The dreamer ensures the city inspires, its bells tuned, its mist inviting. Without the skeptic, the dreamer drifts. Without the dreamer, the skeptic stalls. Renewal comes not from silencing either, but from letting them walk together through the deep forest. The Templars lived that duality, and so can we. Let your eyelids close halfway and picture the forest clearing at dawn. Mist lingers low, the ground damp with dew, and through the trees you see a bell tower, simple but strong. Its bronze mouth gleams faintly, and when it tolls, the sound carries not only across the clearing but through your chest, steadying your breath. Around it people gather, not knights or peasants, not skeptics or believers, but both, standing side by side. They are listening, not arguing. The bell rings not to divide, but to remind. Renewal, you realize, is not a place, but a rhythm, a willingness to let steel and mist belong together. And so renewal in the mist is possible, not by uncovering a single hidden empire, not by proven giants or portals, but by carrying forward what fragments we can, sound that soothes, geometry that inspires, energy that liberates, stories that bind. The past is not a blueprint to copy, but a garden to tend, where seeds from old trees sprout in new soil. The Templars remind us once more that guardianship is not about hoarding, but about passage. They guarded roads so pilgrims could pass safely. We guard stories so imagination can pass safely. They built chapels where bells tolled faith. We can build spaces where bells toll harmony. Renewal is not a miracle, it is a duty. To carry fragments across the deep forest, to let them ring in new lands, to ensure the mist is not silence but song. Let your eyes grow heavy now, breathing slowly as if each breath were a tolling bell. Steel anchors you, mist softens you, bells guide you, and the forest enfolds you. Renewal is not out of reach, it is already here, hidden in fragments, waiting for us to listen. And from here, the bells carry us into the final threshold. For every dream must end in silence, every renewal in rest. Our next bell will toll in slowing rhythm, guiding us into the wind down of night. There, in the deepening mist, we will close the ledger and let the forest lull us into sleep, with bells tolling one last time. The bells toll more slowly now, their rhythm stretching across the mist like ripples in a quiet lake. Each note lingers longer than the last, fading into silence before the next begins. The steel that once rang sharply in battles and towers is softened now, tempered by time, as if the blade itself has been set aside and left to rest in the grass of a deep forest glade. The mist that once obscured now comforts, wrapping gently around branches and stones. We are arriving at the end of the journey where the final bell waits to toll us into sleep. The fact remains simple and eternal. Every civilization, every story, every life has its end. Not as a defeat, but as a rhythm fulfilled. The Romans laid down their roads and aqueducts, and their empire dissolved into new forms. The Egyptians built pyramids that outlasted their dynasties, yet their language fell silent for centuries until scholars coaxed it back through the Rosetta Stone. Even the Templars, with their steel, their vows, their bells ringing in chapels across Europe, came to an end when kings and popes turned against them. Yet none of these endings were absolute. Roads still guide us. Pyramids still awe us. Bells still toll in chapels built upon old foundations. Endings are never erasures. They are thresholds into something new. The quirk lies in how endings feel when we live through them. To the people who saw the streets of Pompeii vanish under ash, it must have felt final. To the last Templar kneeling in chains, the suppression must have felt like silence forever. To a child stepping off an orphan train in a strange town, the departure from one life into another must have felt like disappearance. And yet, from the perspective of centuries, these moments are not only tragedies, but transformations. The ash preserved the art of Pompeii. The legend of the Templars grew stronger in their absence. The children carried fragments of themselves into new families. The bells that seemed to stop were already tolling somewhere else, in another form. The debate softens here, for there is little left to dispute. Skeptics and dreamers both acknowledge that mystery and certainty must share the same sky. Whether Tartary was empire or label, whether mud floods were cataclysm or engineering, whether giants were real or imagined, the stories remain. They shape us not because they are proven, but because they resonate, like bells that hum in our bones long after the strike has faded. The truth is that we need both steel and mist, the solidity of reason to keep us grounded, the softness of wonder to carry us forward. Without steel, the forest overwhelms us. Without mist, the forest loses its magic. Together, they create harmony. Here the Templar Bridge appears one last time, not as a fortress or a chapel, but as a metaphor for continuity itself. The knights were guardians of passage, protecting pilgrims as they crossed dangerous terrain. Tonight they have guarded us too, carrying us through deserts and ziggurats, pyramids and portals, trains and towers, giants and doubts. They have reminded us that history is not a single voice, but a choir, bells ringing in harmony and in dissonance, each adding depth to the song. Their task complete, they fade now into the mist, leaving us with the rhythm they carried across centuries. If your eyes are heavy, imagine the deep forest at night. The trees rise like pillars, their canopies high as cathedral vaults. Mist curls around the trunks, glowing faintly in moonlight. In the distance, a bell tower stands, old but steady, its steel frame weathered but intact. A final bell tolls, not loud, not urgent, but low and resonant. The sound carries through the forest, through your breath, through your heartbeat. Each toll grows slower, softer, until silence settles like a blanket. You feel safe, not because the bell guards you, but because you know it is there, keeping time even as you drift. The hopeful vision of renewal still hums in the background. Tomorrow, cities may hum with acoustic harmony. Towers may drink power from sky and sun. Communities may gather around bells that toll not for conquest, but for peace. But tonight, it is enough to know that such dreams are possible. The mist will carry them. The steel will anchor them. The bells will remind us. Renewal waits, but rest comes first. Let your breathing match the rhythm of the bell now. Inhale as though the bell is rising. Exhale as though it is fading. The deep forest is around you, its silence alive with unseen life, but nothing threatens you. The mist is cool and gentle, wrapping you in safety. The steel lies quiet, resting from its labors. The bells toll one last time, and their echo carries you deeper, softer, into the kind of sleep that feels like a homecoming. And so we close the ledger. The story of Tartary, of mud floods, of pyramids and ziggurats, of airships and towers, of giants and skeptics, of Templars and portals. It has been told, and now it rests. The bells no longer need to toll. The steel no longer needs to strike. The mist no longer needs to conceal. The deep forest holds it all, quiet and enduring. Good night, listener. May the bells toll gently in your dreams. May the mist carry you softly. May the steel guard you silently. And may the deep forest cradle your rest. Sleep now, and let history, both fact and dream, watch over you until the dawn.